with them. We paint tiny people and we play with them.
Hello and welcome to episode 4 of Miniatures Monthly at the Crate and Crowbar. My name is Chris Thurston, and as ever I am joined by Tom Senior.
Hello.
Hi Tom. We've had another one of those months where everything we're going to talk about happened the day before we record.
I think Games Workshop are actually working on our schedule. This is clearly what must be happening because so much news occurs before we kind of go to press.
We were on a last Tuesday of the month schedule, and Games Workshop are on a announce everything
2 days before the last
2 days before the last 2 days of the month schedule. So we just got back from Warhammer Fest in Coventry. We went up to spend the day on the Sunday of the show. And so loads of the things that we've got to talk about today will stem out from that. I think rather than try and talk about everything we saw at the show up front, we might as well try and feed it into everything else we've been doing this month.
Yes.
Because it's, the things we played there dominate the news this month, like the new edition of 40k. And I think, you and I both got a lot out of looking at the Golden Demon entries when it comes to our painting and things like that. Yeah. So we will cover off the normal things we cover in the podcast, but it might be a little bit of a looser, discussion as we kind of move from topic to topic, because in a month where, the thing that has defined this month for us has been the reveal of 8th edition Warhammer 40,000 and the regular drip feed of new things that have just been coming since basically a week after we recorded the last episode, culminating in us actually finally having played it now. That's, I guess, probably the place to start, but actually maybe even before that, it'd be good to talk about our experience of the show more generally. How did it shake out for you?
I really enjoyed it, and I came away feeling massively inspired and very happy to be kind of doing this whole thing. It just felt like a kind of goodwill towards the entire hobby, from the gaming side through to the astonishing Golden Demon stuff that was on display, and the incredible dioramas they had there that they've trucked down from Nottingham. And they've just kind of really imaginative, really exciting, like creatively exciting stuff just to look at and see, and really good access to designers, and they're really chatty and friendly, the Games Workshop people who are there. I came away invigorated. And we were only there for like 5 hours. Yeah,
it was interesting because you'd probably do a loop of the show in terms of going and seeing the Golden Demon stuff and seeing the dioramas and looking at the design stations and having a wander through the Golden Demon, not the Golden Demons, but the Forge World stuff. Probably an hour worth of walking and looking.
Yeah.
And actually sort of 5 hours felt like about right to kind of soak that stuff up. Managed to do 2 demo games of the new edition of 40k, have a wander around the other stuff. But I think, kind of came away from it thinking I think we got the right amount out of it. But at the same time, I would consider going back for a weekend and just having a much more chilled out weekend.
Yeah.
Spending more time just hanging out, basically.
Yeah, for sure. I think, I'd definitely take some models and do some gaming, because you see a lot about the tournaments. There's actually quite a lot of space outside of the tournament area for you to just put down some models on some mats and actually start rolling some dice. And there are smaller, like kill team tourneys and stuff running on each day.
It was nice because I went to Games Day, the predecessor to this event.
Yeah.
As a teenager, like the last one I went to will have been like 2001, 2000. So a long time ago now. And I remember that being quite, one of those sort of convention experiences where everything is super packed and quite intimidating. And I think maybe I've changed more than events have, in that I'm bigger now and have disposable income, and I'm not intimidated by crowds of adults in metal t-shirts, in the way that maybe I was when I was 12. But, still, I found it very comfortable. Like, it's sort of I think maybe the quite intense hobby focus of the event, because I didn't do a tournament. Obviously, I guess if you're there to play competitive 40k, competitive Blood Bowl, it is quite an intense event because it's 2 days of play. I was glad we didn't do that. We explained our reasons, I think, in the last episode.
Yeah, we did. So was it 6 games? 6 games?
Yeah.
4 games on the first day, and that's your entire day. That's, and you don't get to see any of the cool stuff happening outside. So it felt like you were choosing the tournament or the conference.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we went the way we did.
Yeah, I think, and the sort of, it was sort of, I think it was so focused on going and just looking at cool models and dioramas. And that's sort of like very much in my and I'm certainly not unique in this, but that's very much my end of enjoying the hobby necessarily. Like I'm more interested in that than anything else when it comes down to it.
I'd love to see just the heavy metal armies and the army painter armies, because you see a lot of standards, levels of standard of painting coming out of Games Workshop. So they're like army painter guys who just paint huge armies extremely quickly. They just do it bare minimum, and they look great. But it's really interesting to see those models and then see the next level up, which is the heavy metal, which is stuff they photograph. Yeah. And actually seeing that in person and seeing kind of how vivid and vibrant they make those color schemes that they pop on camera. It's just, it took so much out. If you're a painter, you can take so much out of just looking at them. Like, it sounds silly to say to someone, I walked around for 5 hours and looked at things, and, that was a really intellectual experience, but it is. If you
it's interesting because I think inevitably our discussion about this event is going to be divided between, like, obviously the big standout stuff, the obvious stuff, like we saw these new models, we played with them, we saw all of the stuff we're going to talk about today, but also like a lot of the most valuable things was simply like it does sound super well. It's like experiencing things about those models, like about the way they're painted, about the way they're presented, about the way the dioramas shook out. Like I can stare at the best of those dioramas for ages, just kind of appreciating how the composition's been done, how the color palettes have been picked, and that kind of thing. We should probably dive into the meat of it though, because new 40k is the thing right now. When we got there, the first thing we did was basically go and queue for a game, and when we to the middle of the afternoon, we went back, played again. And I guess we were playing with a reduced version of what will be in the new starter set, which is Primaris Marines. So the new Space Marines, the new taller Space Marines that we talked about in the last episode, actually, when they'd been leaked. This, the photos that had gone out of leggy Space Marines. Yep. They're a thing. Multiple units of them against the new 40k Nurgle stuff. So the Plague Marines, Pox Walkers, which are basically zombies, and the sort of Nurgle Chaos Lord, who's a hulking guy in Terminator armor with an axe who hits extremely hard.
Terrifying.
Kind of trying to figure out where to start. I guess we should start with how it plays, and neither of us are necessarily in a position to talk about it from a 40k perspective, but it's, as the more and more they've revealed about this game, I think we both have that sense going into it, it's really interesting playing it as an AOS player, I think. Yeah,
so much has travelled across from one system to the other.
Yeah.
And yet it's been carried across and tweaked in really interesting ways that makes it kind of fascinating as an AOS player. Basic things like units that have charged go first in new 40k, whereas in Age of Sigmar, you take it in turns to activate.
Yeah.
So in 40k, the chargers go first, then you go into the taking it in turns to activate phase. So it makes charging much more of an important decision. It gives an advantage to the charging unit, which you would imagine they would have as charging,
Yeah. And that's balanced against Overwatch.
Yes.
Whereas if you charge into a ranged unit, they get to make a shooting attack with their entire unit. However, the to hit value, the ballistic skill value of that attack is set to 6. So you have to roll a 6 to hit with it, because it's a sort of a reaction shot, but that can still be especially and interesting.
Yeah, especially if you've got like a huge rapid fire unit, like the new floating gun platforms in Terminator armor that the Primaris have. Because they've got they roll 18. There's 3 of them. They're rolling 18 shots. So if you charge them, you expect to get 18 shots and
3 hits on average
on 6s exactly. Yeah. So they're going to do some damage. And not only does that feel really fluffy, it feels really correct. When I imagine that scenario in my mind's eye, it also does balance against that charging mechanic. But I thought that was probably the most interesting change they've made from the AOS.
Yeah, I think there are a few others, like having this sort of stipulation that you can't shoot into combat, but pistols can.
Right.
Which makes a lot of sense, gives pistols a role rather than just being bad guns, basically. There's loads of stuff like that. Like, I think it's interesting coming at it from a point of view of like the sort of philosophical differences between the systems, because Age of Sigmar is ultimately a game about heroic fantasy and sort of magic people doing magic things. And I don't just mean that in terms of the literal wizards that are in that game. Every character is kind of larger than life.
Yeah.
Particularly in the new range. There are still legacy models from the old world that are more low fantasy, kind of, I am just a man with a bow.
There's a reason why AOS translates really well into skirmish scenario format and translates really well into Silver Tower. It's that you could pick up any model from any range and that it stands alone as an individual hero.
Yeah.
So it's got that larger in life. Everything's a hero in an Age of Sigmar.
Yes, exactly. And so the thing it's simulating is not it's not a medieval warfare game, which is I think why it alienated parts of the original fantasy fan base. That fantasy was at a crossroads where it was either going to still try and be a fantasy game, try and be a sort of historical war game that also had magic elements, or it's just going to go magic, and it just went magic basically.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the things in AOS are sort of simulate like things like Mortal Wounds, which I think New 40k also has, but like Mortal Wounds are a perfect example of like it's not even like. It's basically plot damage. It's, you know what I mean? Like, it's sort of like, it sort of represents the, Mortal Wounds kind of represent the spectacle of what's going on rather than try and simulate the sort of actual material effects of like, you have moved this distance and, thrown a rock weighing this much, so it does this damage based on this kind of armor.
Yeah.
A lot of old 40k's complexity came from that level of simulation granularity. And I think what impresses me about new 40k is the way it still has, it is more of a simulation than AOS is. It goes an extra mile in order to simulate how different weapons behave against different types of armor that kind of thing in a way that AOS both doesn't and doesn't need to. Because a sword is a sword is a sword is a sword at the end of the day. What you're simulating in AOS is the magic man wielding it. Whereas in 40k, I think you said this yesterday, like, it's about trained people using gear, and the gear defines them as much as the training does.
Absolutely, yeah.
So there's, what I liked about it is as we played, I got a sense of how all the different weapons behaved, which helped that mind's eye picture. But what I liked a lot was how straightforward that was. I was really worried, like, my least favorite thing in the world is looking things up on a table.
Yeah, definitely.
And actually, I was quite impressed by how quickly we were able to just run it for ourselves after we'd been given a little primer on the basics.
Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of weapon profiles. That's where the kind of complexity of the game seems to be for the new player, I've found. Especially, for example, the Space Marine Primaris captain has a power fist and a power sword, and he has 5 attacks, and he could choose, you could take 2 with a sword and 3 with a fist, or fist 5 times.
Yeah, indeed.
As he is wont to do. And that level they have different profiles which have different armor modification values and hit values and other effects. So that's kind of where you're getting that complexity from.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting change from AOS. But still, it resolves quickly because the datasheet's good, I think. You can glance at the datasheet and see exactly what you need to roll. Stuff like weapon skill, just being, if it's weapon skill, if you've got WS2, you just roll 2+.
Yeah.
You're not looking up an opponent's weapon skill and then going to a table to do it. And the other thing they've done is they've made the strength to toughness relationship much, much easier. So essentially, if your strength is higher than the enemy's toughness, it's a 3+ roll. If your strength is more than double the enemy's toughness, it's a 2+ roll. Otherwise, if you've got parity, it's 4+.
Yeah.
And then, there's a sliding scale there that is, you could just look at the 2 numbers and know instantly what roll you need to make.
And mathematically, it's super interesting.
Yes.
What it does to balance the game. So like for the sort of Space Marine and Space Marine equivalents, that we were playing with, like toughness 4 was the kind of average value. And that's pretty tough. That means that you have to have strength 5 or above, which is again above average. It's a rating out of 10. You have to have strength 5 or above, which felt above average to get a benefit, to be wounding them on a 3+ rather than a 4+.
Yeah.
And then you'd have to be, because it's, in order to get that 2+ wound roll, you need to be more than double. So you need to be at strength 9 or 10, which is like the upper echelons of the game.
Yeah.
So basically it means that only the strongest weapons and the most powerful things in the game are going to be getting easy wound rolls against Space Marines, which is as it should be.
Yes.
But then you got the really interesting things like the, like the Nurgle Lord and I think the Space Marine Captain at toughness 5, where that suddenly becomes a really interesting number. And interesting numbers might be the most boring thing in wargaming, but it means that you can never, in a out of 10 system, you can never be more than double 5 without bonuses, which means that like that is a sort of an interesting threshold to have hit. It means that you're never going to get a 2-up wound against those characters.
Yeah.
And I think those kinds of, I really like that because it creates interesting granularity and meaningful characterful differences between units on the board. But at the same time, I'm terrified about looking up. I don't want to be looking up strength versus toughness values on a big table to figure out my hit to hit value. But, all they had for each demo station was like a laminated piece of paper that had the Space Marine units on one side and the Nurgle units on the other side. And I just held that for most of the game, and I had to double check some numbers because I hadn't memorized them. But every time it was just, I could just tell you instantly what you were rolling.
Yeah.
Because it's like, okay, what's your weapon? Oh, it's a 6. Okay, and you're shooting it as strength toughness 4. So that's 3 up. Done.
And then it justifies having that relationship. Like, so you can say, why not just have it be a 3+ to wound? But then having this system allows you to include weapons that you can overcharge to increase your strength. So in certain circumstances, you want to overcharge a las cannon to double its strength, and then a plasma gun, to double its strength, and then get a better roll against a tough target, which comes with a risk, because when you overcharge and rolls ones, as I may have done a lot, the Primaris Marine will explode to just be incinerated by their weapon. And that interesting interaction can't exist in the AOS system, where it's just 3+ to wound on anything.
And that's really like, so that Space Marine Captain, the choice between his two weapons is a bit niche in some ways. So basically the choice is you have a sword, which is always it's a particular, I think it's always strength 5 or something. I think it's always his strength. But he has a weapon skill of 2, so it hits on a 2, and it always does 2 damage. So it's kind of flat. The Power Fist doubles his strength to 8, I think. -1 to hit, so it hits on a 3 rather than 2 because of his weapon skill, and it does D3 damage. But what's really interesting is you are on the fly kind of making interesting decisions about how you want to weight the dice in your favor based on the decisions you make about the weapon. So you know, in the experience, it was like if you're trying to wound a target with high toughness, you go for the Power Fist, because even though your hit roll is weaker, you'll get a better wound roll because you go to your strength 8 at that point versus toughness 5, you're getting that 3 up. Whereas I think it's actually strength 4 for the sword. So whereas if you go for the sword against that, you're rolling 2 up to hit, but then you're 5 up to wound because there's
worse odds.
Worse odds. But against and also you kind of want that D3 damage because it has that potential to do loads. But against a horde of enemies, as we found out, and we'll talk through those games, I guess, you want the 2 up to hit and the 3 up to wound because of the relative strength values. And that's the strength versus toughness. And that's, I think, maybe a little bit heady, but like in the moment, it's a really interesting strategic decision about how you split those attacks. And again, despite the fact I really like the system and I think it's a meaningful advance on what AOS does, I actually don't think it's necessarily the best fit for AOS either.
I agree. Yeah.
Like, I think it definitely fits both the fiction of 40k and also, the sort of the pace of the game. Whereas, as soon as AOS gets that level of complexity, I think something of the kind of the immediacy of the combat is lost, particularly when you're thinking about like Conan and the Barbarian style hyper magic heroes wailing on each other. Like, can you imagine the thing where you're trying to figure out what kind of hoof attack to use on your steed before you charge? Like, I just don't think it's a good fit, but it really worked in this context. Yeah,
it's very much an in-between state. It's very much it is like AOS, but with that extra layer of depth if you want it. So it's always if you wanted to pick a system and just wanted AOS is super fast and super nice. And it is an interesting strategic game, but 40k is going to be more so, I think. It's going to be more of a wargamers game for certain, just because of those decisions that you have to make. And it was interesting to see how specialized the units were as well in that starter box. So the Nurgle Lord was just pure combat, and he moves very slowly forwards, and it's a really strong mental image of this, because he's this hulking, amazing model for him. Hulking brute, this enormous axe, and there's just noxious fumes coming off him, and he's just plodding forwards towards the Primaris as they try and gun him down, and as soon as he gets to combat, he absolutely wrecks stuff with the axe. It's just a monstrous figure. And then you've got like the Primaris plasma gun unit who just do one thing really, really well, really good ranged. But I mean, they're still Space Marines, they're still tough, but you don't want them in combat. The roles felt very well defined between the units. It was
interesting because, maybe we should go through those games pan out, because our first game, in a first for this podcast, I won. But I won in a way that probably wasn't that much fun for either of us, because it was a total dicing on my part. I'd had amazing dice.
It was extraordinary.
And B, I think it was because of the way the demos have been set up. I mean, like, credit to GW, they got a lot of people through these demo units, and they had one person managing 2 different games, trying to teach the rules to people. And they were sort of setting the games up sort of in the middle, and not with the full selection of units that are in that starter box. And so that one began with the Nurgle Lord in combat with the Space Marine captain, the unit of sort of Nurgle Plague Marines kind of moving up, and the new sort of Nurgle Plague drone, which it's not the same as Plague drones from the demon side, which are the bees, basically.
Oh, yes,
the bad wasps.
Yes.
This is like, it looks like one of the recent Forge World Mechanicum units, like a kind of twin rotor hover drone, but very Nurglified, beautiful fucking
Fantastic
model. Like
model
we should talk about models separately because that's going to be the whole different thing.
I love that model.
And yeah, the first thing is like, so that thing like automatically hits, I think, based on the number of attacks it gets. So you roll like, you get D6 attacks, and that's how many hits you get, and you get straight to wounds. So the first roll of the game, I rolled like something like 6 hits straight away, and then all into your plasma guns. I'd won the initiative roll, and just like the plague drone immediately killed 4 plasma marines by itself. Then my shooting from my plague marines killed the others, so I'd wiped out one of your units straight away. And then the Nurgle Lord did like 4 wounds to your 6 wound captain.
Yeah.
And you brought in the Incessa Marines, which are the flying Terminators, weapon platforms things. But it was like way too late. It's almost not worth dwelling on that game because it was just like, it was just like what happens when you roll just a bucket of 6s is like stuff dies.
Yeah.
When we went back later in the day, the second game we had was way more interesting.
Yeah.
So maybe we're going through slower, although the start was fucking hilarious. So,
it was.
So in that game, we mixed up the units a little bit. So you had the full unit of, I've completely forgotten what they're called, Hellblasters, basically Marines with plasma cannons.
Yeah.
Plasma guns. The captain, and a unit of Incessors. I've gotten them mixed up with the other one. The tactical Marines.
The
new tactical Marines.
The new Primaris tactical Marines.
Yes. And the captain. And I had the Nurgle Lord, the Plague Marines, and the Poxwalkers, but not the drone, not the flying thing.
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness. And we didn't start with them in combat. It's obviously, it was an extremely small board, but we started at opposite ends of the field, as you would expect. You won the roll-off, didn't you?
Believe so.
Yes. What happened next? Because it was fucking funny.
So I ordered my plasma gun Marines to shoot. I can't remember what I ordered them to shoot. Was it a general?
I think it was the Plague Marines.
Oh, that would make sense. So I ordered them to do that, and then I decided to overcharge.
Which gives you plus strength and plus damage, right?
That's right. So it takes up to 2 damage, and I think it turns 4+ into a 3+, to win them. So not a bad idea. But of course, if you roll a 1, one explodes, and I think I've rapid fired. I'm not sure if you can rapid fire.
I think we might roll too many dice.
Yes, I think so. I think they still only got 1 shot. But of all the dice I rolled 4 1s. And 4 of my Primaris, the new breed of Space Marines, the Belisarius Callers,
fresh from the forges of Mars,
10,000 years developing. Changing the Emperor's gene code to produce these slightly taller men. And yeah, they weapons. 4 of them blew up, melted them, which was obviously hilarious. Pretty much like it was really fun because I was really excited to play with the Primaris Space Marines. Love them, new models, and the whole fantasy of the Space Marines just feels more like stronger and more vivid to me now. So it's hilarious to actually encounter them the first time and start rolling some dice and watch them all just die in droves, like self-inflicted half of the time.
I mean, I think we'll get to this, but like, when we got the demo game in the first game, and I had a plasma gun as well, and it was like, the guy's like, do you want to overcharge it? And I said, yes. And I think maybe the AOS player in us was like, of course you take the extra. You just go for
question.
It. And actually, no, that is a strategic decision.
Yeah.
Like, you should really think about the numbers involved before you choose to overcharge your plasma gun, because a 1 in 6 chance to simply lose the firer is not, you don't fuck around with that. Like,
no. Especially I bet those guys are going to be quite expensive points wise in the game eventually.
Yeah.
So I wonder how many points I lost though. We don't know yet.
I mean, because the stupid thing is as well, like, we hadn't been able to find the 5th model when we were setting up the game.
Oh yeah,
so we'd only given you 4 of them, and they all blew up. And then we saw that it'd actually been sort of like tucked away at the corner of the board and lost. So we said, just set him up now and then fire with him. He didn't fire. So, we'd resolve the rest of those wounds. And then, but the rest of your shooting I don't think did very much, because one of the things Nurgle has is, you have, in addition to, actually it was worth explaining saves. So every unit has a save, which can be affected by AP armor piercing, which works exactly like Rend in Age of Sigmar. So you can, weapons with AP reduce the save of the target, which makes sense, as in they penetrate armor. And then, some units, mostly the leaders seemingly, have invulnerable saves, which in this, is really, I love this system. I think it's super cool. If you have an invulnerable save, you choose which of your saves you use. Your invulnerable save can never be changed. So, So for example, the Nurgle Lord has a 2-up save, which means that wandering into like bolt pistol fire, where they don't have any kind of AP, he doesn't die. He just walks.
Doesn't care.
Yeah. He just doesn't give a shit. He just walks at them and they bounce off, which is perfect for the fiction.
Yeah, it's great.
However, if you shoot him with like a las cannon or something which has huge, or a plasma gun that has huge AP, then he has a 4-up invulnerable save. So it basically, your invulnerable save puts a cap on how much armor piercing you can suffer. Which
is perfect for heroes. They've done a lot to protect heroes in the game because, of course, you can't, you can't shoot a hero if they're behind something else you can shoot, basically. Which is you can screen your heroes with other units, essentially. Which didn't come in tactical use for our tiny game, but is obviously hugely important. And that, along with invulnerable saves, will serve to protect heroes from the huge amounts of shooting in the game, which is something AOS might benefit from a little bit. Some sort of adjustment in that way.
And then the Nurgle units specifically have a special rule called Disgustingly Resilient, which sort of simulates the fact that sometimes you shoot a Nurgle dude in the head and his head explodes, but it just keeps coming because he's so poorly, he's still alive.
So
and so that means that whenever Nurgle units take a wound, they have a 5-up save against just all wounds forever. Which
is incidentally, the Deathless minions save that exists for death. So that's another thing that's kind of come across from AOS.
Yeah. But again, very thematic. And again, it means that like you are not hypothetically, you are not going to shoot a Nurgle Lord to death. Because if you don't have AP, I do prefer the word rend, I think, than AP. If you don't have AP on your weapon, he is going to be saving on a 2-up and then a 5-up against everything you do, which is statistically likely to not slow him down very much. So because 4 of your plasma guys had exploded, I then moved up and did my shooting, and I'm pretty sure my Plague Marine bolter guns killed the last guy. However, I then fired. No, they didn't, because I fired into your captain. I don't think I did anything. Because the reason I say this is because one of my Plague Marines had a plasma gun as well, and he exploded. Because I remember very clearly, no one who owns a plasma weapon died to anything other than their own plasma weapon in that game. Because I think it was on the second turn, your final remaining plasma Marine blew himself up.
We learned an important lesson about plasma guns.
Don't overcharge them. Just don't overcharge them.
It's fine. They're quite good. They're quite good normally.
I think you overcharge them for the shot that will kill the thing that will turn the game, right? Like you overcharge them for this
clutch thing, right? Or you've got to take down the Dreadnought, and you need that AP. Yeah.
Not just because.
Because you can. Press the big red button, it makes it better.
Yeah, don't do that.
No, don't press the button.
So then we ended up in this situation which was super cool, where like your Plasma Marines had gone. My Nurgle Lord was just stomping towards you. He only moves 4 inches, and then he has an AOS style charge roll, which I kept failing, to be fair. Did keep failing my charge. Plague Marines moved up, and my Poxwalkers, which are also very slow, just sort of shambling towards you. And then over the course of, I think, the next 2 turns, because they were fast turns, because we're not playing very many models, you're shooting from your kind of, you kept running away, basically. So we had this image of these
bravely tactically retreated.
Yeah, but like the Primaris Marine is sort of like walking backwards slowly, shooting into this oncoming kind of Nurgle horde.
Yeah.
That shooting killed all of my Plague Marines. And then as my kind of Nurgle Lord closed in, your captain charged into the Poxwalkers, right?
That's right. So I think I got a round of shooting into the Poxwalkers, and then the captain charged in to finish them off.
And then
he did.
Yeah, but then making the right decision to use the sword instead, because it's better against weaker things, just murdered them. Like, you killed 5 of them in one attack.
It was amazing, actually. I love the way the heroes worked in the game, because they both were really thematic, and, you know, in your mind's eye, you'd expect a Space Marine captain in the new Primaris armor with a huge power fist and a sword to go in and just kill everything in a massive blaze of violence, which is what happened.
Yeah, so he wiped out all of the Poxwalkers, but my Nurgle Lord did succeed in the charge on him and then killed him.
I think actually I charged my captain.
Oh no, you did.
I did. So knowing how terrifying he was, I thought the thing that the Space Marine captain would do would be to charge the Nurgle Lord and to protect his fire line.
Yeah.
And to go in and take it on with his power fist, which he did. And he got butchered. He just got straight up butchered.
I think he did like 2 wounds.
Yeah, he
had
to.
Got cut in half.
Scuffed him and got chopped in half, again, which just seems to be a statistical normality.
And then, so at this point, you only had your kind of surviving, I think it's Incessa Marines, but the new tactical Marines remaining.
5 of those guys.
And they were sort of just backing
off. It was only a 2 foot by 2 foot board, and they reached the very back of it and then slid sideways to try and get a few extra inches away from him as the Nurgle Lord closed in step by step.
And you got him, actually some good shooting got him to, because those bolters do have AP on them, but not enough to make it worth using my invulnerable save. So I had a 3-up save, but I was at that point taking some wounds.
Yeah.
I think he got him to 2 wounds, and then I did make the charge at last. And he charges into, and then, I mean, bear in mind that each Marine has 2 wounds, but I think his axe does 3 damage with each hit, and he swings it 4 times. So on the first, and because I charged, I got the first attack, and that first attack killed 3 Marines. Yeah. So as soon as he hits the line of them, they just start, just imagine this Nurgle Lord just ripping 3 Primaris Marines to pieces.
Yeah.
At which point, though, you got your melee attack with your pistols, I think, into combat. We're sort of figuring it out.
Yeah, I can't remember what I attacked with. They do get an attack of some sort.
But it was like, I still had my 2-up save against it.
Yes.
But I managed to roll 2 1s on my 2-up save.
That's
take
right.
2 wounds and die.
Yeah.
So I managed to save my reputation for losing every game we played right at the last minute. But
I think, they don't, I think they just clubbed him to death with the butts of their new bolt rifles.
That's right.
Mars forged technology at work.
But it was such a cool ending because it was this sort of, it felt like that cliche in a movie where I don't know, the crashing train or something, comes screeching to a halt inches from the protagonist's face. Just, he just brought down that guy right as the last blow was coming in. Because the next round of combat,
he
would have killed you.
It was all over. For sure.
And so it was super cool and super close. Really positive experience overall. It felt like the Space Marines could do a little bit of everything, whereas the Nurgle, obviously they have strengths and weaknesses, like you say. Whereas the Nurgle units are much kind of more specialized. The drone is amazing at shooting, but is just shooting.
Yeah.
The Poxwalkers are just zombies. They can't shoot. They just walk in a line until they finally get something and bog it down. The Nurgle Lord is amazing in melee combat, but can't shoot and is slow, so just has to walk at people till he gets there. Whereas, even the fact that the captain has a bolter built into his power fist.
Yeah, which is awesome, by the way.
Which is awesome. It felt like it gave the Space Marines a bit more kind of flexibility in how each individual unit was used.
It's actually, I realized some stuff. I went over the captain's data sheet again when I got back home, and that thing counts as a pistol, so he gets those extra attacks in combat as well, which I forgot. And also, he's got a 6-inch bubble where people get +1 to hit, where presumably he just shouts, "Shoot better, man!" And then
doesn't that mean that he can fire it into combat, not that he gets to use it in combat?
I think pistols you can use in combat, but maybe not.
I thought that just meant you could shoot during the combat phase, as in you could shoot if you were engaged in combat, but I don't know.
I think pistols can be used almost as, I don't know. Don't know. We've not actually seen the rule book, we should stress.
Yeah. We also didn't do leadership checks or anything like that.
No. So it was very much a kind of bare bones rules thing, but it gave us a sense of the flavour of, what it's going to be.
And it was loads of fun.
And it was really good. And also, it felt really characterful, which is what is important to me. It felt, there's a battle there that I remember, and in my mind's eye I can see how it played out, and it was really dramatic, and the models amazing.
Yeah.
So it was a really good experience.
Yeah. I think the thing that was good about it as well is it doesn't, there are still strengths and weaknesses with AOS. It doesn't make me say I wish this was AOS's system. Because like I say, I don't think AOS needs that deeper stat system for what it simulates, but also, but there are things I would like them to bring across. I liked the differentiation of weapon types. So pistols having a different set of uses to rifles. It's obviously a sensible military thing, but actually there are enough sort of steampunk elements in Age of Sigmar that it could kind of use something like that, because one of Age of Sigmar's biggest problems is shooting into combat, really. And obviously there's a much greater range of things that count as shooting weapons in AOS than there are in 40k. Because the shooting weapon in AOS could be a longbow if you're in traditional medieval warfare mode. Yeah. But it could be a magic air gold powered rifle if you're a character in Overlord, one of the new dwarves.
Yeah.
Or it could be a ball of energy that you sing into being if you are a Kyric acolyte. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of different things to count as melee weapons, ranged weapons, and therefore it is difficult to have a hard and fast rule about what can and can't be used while you're also fighting someone.
Yeah.
For example, it makes sense like pink horrors throw fire at people because they're demons. And it works for me that they can do that in combat, right? Because it's coming out of their hands. Whereas it doesn't work for me that, as, the AOS meta has developed, that 1 million orcs with longbows can shoot those longbows into the person they're fighting in melee combat as well as they can shoot them with someone inches and inches away.
Yeah.
So it feels like AOS does need some way of simulating what 40k is doing with the pistol rule, of like, you can't shoot your rifle into combat, but you can shoot your pistol, which solves the problem.
I also think that heroes need a bit more protection in AOS than they have. Maybe it's just because I've played armies that have a lot of linchpin characters like Tzeentch and like Flesh Eater Courts, where they rely enormously on their hero units. And I've got loads of Judicators, and I've got a Venator, and now I've got some long strikes, and you just sort of unravel an army by quite easily killing them.
Yeah.
And your opponent can hide behind stuff, so it's a good reason to put lots of terrain in your games and stuff. But if you're rolling that on the table and there just isn't much terrain, it feels like that shouldn't really affect what heroes are going to be protected or not protected. It feels like there needs to be some extra barrier that stops me from just trivially shooting everything, pouring all my fire into your Gaunt Summoner or something like that,
Sometimes just honking at a hill so loudly he dies.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a hard one to tweak for AOS because it kind of is mostly balanced, I would say, apart from a few armies.
I think the way I would do it is I would say that the only ranged weapons that can be used, so I don't know, if there is an enemy unit within 3 inches of you, so melee combat range basically, you can only, in the shooting phase, you can only fire weapons that have a range shorter than 18 inches or 12 inches or something like that. And that would have the flip side of, it would protect a lot of the things that currently can do that, but also it would provide a reason to be glad that your like Stormcast Vanguard have short-ranged crossbow pistols.
Yeah.
Because at the moment that's just bad. Like, they have crossbow pistols and it's nice that they can shoot, but they're still bad because they are too short range to be useful, right? Like,
yeah, it's similar with you can take some Raptors so I've built them as long strikes, which are snipers basically, which they're rad, and we'll discuss why in Skirmish later. But they can also be built with incredible rapid fire crossbows, but their range is short, and Stormcast are quite maneuverable, but you're going to have to set up like screens around them and stuff, which is what the Aether Wings are for. And it's kind of not worth it. It's just never worth it to have that short range Mega Blast unit. So the units you see you've been using in the game a lot are just really long range artillery.
Yeah.
And snipers and that kind of thing.
Yeah, the gunline thing.
The gunline thing, yeah.
And it feels like, there's giving that, range limitation, as in like having it only be short range weapons that can be used during the combat phase, provides a meaningful difference between those units rather than short range just being worse.
Yeah.
And at the moment it's in the position, like for example, Kyric Acolytes, have a 12-inch range on their shot, I think. And it's 14 inches for blue horrors and 18 inches for pink horrors. So if the cutoff was 18 inches, maybe you lose pink horrors shooting into combat, but suddenly the things they split into can shoot into combat. And Kyric Acolytes, which currently exist in a bit of a weird limbo for Tzeentch, where they're not as good at shooting as pink horrors, and they're not as good at fighting as Zangor. And yet they're quite expensive. Kind of gives them a little bit more of a kind of a role in some ways. And maybe it risks overpowering some units, but that could go with the points rebalancing as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's such a significant redesign of the game, and I do wonder if it's needed to an extent, because the difference between 40k and AOS is that almost everything in 40k has a gun.
Yeah.
Whereas that's certainly not true for AOS. A lot of people are building very heavy shooting armies because of stuff like Cunning Ruck, which is like a formation that gives it absurd power. Whereas for stuff that doesn't really have that kind of additional layer of rules, it's kind of fine that half the army is shooting and half the army is combat, and maybe that does work.
I don't know that it necessarily is okay, because like you're right that like in 40k, the fantasy of 40k is of a shooting game most of the time. You have some standout melee combat units and heroes, but most of the time when you think about battles in 40k, you're thinking about gunfights. But like, if you can shoot in AOS, that is a flat-out advantage over a unit that cannot shoot.
Yeah,
it is functionally an extra round of attacks every round in combat. It is a big difference, and the game is costed around that. Like, as soon as you can shoot, the points cost for the unit goes up.
Yeah.
A huge amount. And I think that is a weird position for a fantasy game to be in. Because, like I keep saying, like, you know, it is simulating kind of, you know, heroic fantasy where people can do crazy feats of strength and durability and things. But actually, the most powerful thing you can possibly do is shoot. And I don't think that's quite right. Like, you know, I think we've spoken about this on a previous episode in a different context, talking about playing the meta. But, like, you know, I've got 2 boxes of Zangor Skyfire / Enlightened, where Enlightened are the melee one and Skyfires are the ranged one. And if I wanted to be powerful, I absolutely should never assemble either of them as Enlightened.
Yeah, Skyfires are insane.
Like, Enlightened come with the extra rule that, like, they can also be made off their discs as well.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to ever do that at all. Like, just, why would you even, like, you know, it makes no sense. And I feel like there are too many, like, AOS, I like it as a hobby game, and I like it as a narrative game a lot. And I think maybe the game suffers for being over power gamed. Definitely. I have no interest in that. However, I think there is some distance GW could go that they're not currently going towards just making sure that the decisions you're making about how you assemble your models still feel somewhat impactful. Like, when I make that, as I am going to, that hobby-focused decision to assemble some of those models as Zangor Enlightened, I shouldn't know in my heart of hearts that I'm making the bad decision.
Yeah. Like
a straight up stupid decision. Like, that if I wanted to win more games and I wanted to have a more effective army, I should just make the why, you know, because one of them is rubbish. I mean, they're not terrible, but like, one of them has a amazing shooting attack and the other one doesn't. So, you know, the whole point of the Zangor Enlightened being great in close combat feels a little bit moot when the guys with the sniper bows can fire them at people 1 inch away. You know, like,
yeah, it's mad. It's sort of got the so the long strike. He hits on 2+ wounds on a 3+, rend 2, damage 2, really strong shooting attack, which is also a close combat attack for him.
Yeah,
and that seems strange.
Yeah, like, given that it's a 36-inch range, like,
yeah,
you know, there should be that point where suddenly, as soon as someone's closed 2-3 inches of him,
right, he can't shoot.
He is a man with a knife.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
That is the fantasy I think is missing from AOS at the moment. The 40k is actually getting right, which is weird, because, like,
it's interesting because it's interesting to see what they have taken and haven't taken from AOS, and the stuff that obviously they think is working, stuff that fits the fantasy, but they haven't taken the double turn rule, the rolling for turns rule.
Yeah, true.
Which I personally still think isn't great in AOS. It creates a lot of drama. I like that, but I think it significantly changes the way that armies behave in a way that isn't what armies are supposed to behave like.
Yeah, I think I like the strategic layer it adds to the game.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting having to plan for the potential of a double turn.
That's right.
However,
so abstract though.
Yeah, what does it represent?
Yeah.
Like, what, you know, sometimes people just do more stuff.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. You could say it maybe represents the momentum of the battle, the way things sort of seem to go your way for a period and then swings the other way. But it has nothing to do with how well you're playing. And it just feels weird to have to position your entire army just in case the enemy does 2 lots of attacks and 2 lots of shooting and 2 lots of movement. It's like, doesn't that have just forced such a cautious and, you know, hesitant way of war game, really? I mean, people who play it seriously sure would disagree, but I do think it's something I might like to see go from the game. I think it's too big a decision to take it out of AOS at this stage, but I'm glad that 40k is just going to be straightforward turn order.
Yeah, that said, I will say this, like, I, you know, absolutely destroyed you in that first game we played because I won the first initiative roll of the game. I don't actually know how determining initiative at the beginning of the game works, but let's assume it's a 50-50 chance per player based on other factors. And then you did your turn, and then I got my turn. And the thing that the roll, it doesn't necessarily fix this problem, but the thing that the per round initiative roll does in AOS is it means that if you get screwed the first time, the second time you have a chance to get a double turn. Because you only ever get a double turn in AOS if you went second the last time round, right? That's the way it works. And that's what I really like, because, like, actually a double turn in that game of 40k that we played might have saved you.
Yeah.
because suddenly your captain's shooting twice, your surviving Marines are shooting twice. And that would have made a huge difference. As it is, you had just lost because I had removed too much and you were never going to get that momentum swing the other way.
Yeah, but so much of that position was about deployment, which we had no hand over. And if you're playing on a 6x4 board, you're responsible for where your stuff is when you're reaching in engagement range.
True. I do still think there are arguments for it. Like, it can... I think it's not like people always get obsessed with the idea that a double turn is the best thing in the world, but actually I've never found that it's felt like the thing that's ended the game. Like, I think it's always tends to be a drama prolonger. Basically, I don't know. I think I need to...
It's interesting. I think it's because we've played a few games and we know to play for it. But I still think it doesn't fit with the fantasy.
Yes.
Even though it does create drama. So
I certainly agree that I don't know what it represents.
Yeah.
Like, because in that game we played, you had, your jetpack Marines, right? And they do a huge amount of shooting. And if you'd gotten a double turn, if that was possible, you would have gotten to do that shooting twice. Yeah. Which probably would have been the great evener, right? Because then
shots.
Yeah, then my amazing multiple, I'm just going to roll all sixes now, rolls would have been balanced out by the fact that you then get to roll a shitload of dice twice.
Yeah.
And it would have made a huge difference. And losing that potential is what lost you the game, because it put a hard cap on the amount of damage you could potentially do back.
But then that's not necessarily justified, because the way that deployment happened was deliberately optimal for Nurgle. Like, the Nurgle captain started the game in combat with the Space Marine captain. That only ever goes one way. True. And the Nurgle Marines unit was within range of the plasma cannon people, and the drone was in range of the plasma cannon people. Like, it was the optimal setup for Nurgle. Yeah. And if you've achieved that in your deployment and your maneuvering, then you deserve to reap the rewards to an extent. And to have it all undone by a turn order roll, seems a little bit arbitrary.
I agree with that, actually.
Having said all that, like, it has generated great moments in the AOS games we've played. Like, it has been created moments of whoa, or shit, I really needed that.
Yeah, the two things you can feel
in war. Yeah. So I mean, it's an interesting and brave piece of design, but I'm glad it's not in 40k, and I'm really interested, because I'm going to play both systems to see like which one comes out on top. Yeah. Once I start playing them both.
Yeah, totally. Also, I do totally agree with you that I still don't know what that role represents in terms of, like, I can think of a moment in, like, a turn as, I mean, I still find that fuzzier in, as an X-Wing player, I find that fuzzier in all Warhammer games, because you do so much in your turn. The fact that you do moving and casting spells and shooting and combat, and there is some turn-by-turn stuff in combat, but everything else is sort of like, because I always think of a turn in a turn-based game as like a moment in time. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, it's like 6 seconds or something like that.
6 to 10 seconds of slashing and firing.
And in X-Wing, where sort of unit activation is based on pilot skill, and that is sort of, player agnostic. It's just you activate in the order that happens in. Yeah. I can mind's eye see the procession of events, this pilot moves, and then in reaction to that, this better pilot moves, and what I mean, that kind of thing. Whereas it still feels weird to me, and even 40k, even in a fully, reliable turn-based game, it still feels weird to me that one army does all of this shit, and then the other army does all of their shit. That just feels weird to me generally. I think, but then AOS has the compound problem of like, this army does all of its shit twice, and the other army just sort of stands there, and like, that just still feel odd. But that's a broader issue for me, I think, with big, large scale war games. Yeah. What we should talk about, because otherwise I think we could just sit here and talk about 40k rules all day. Indeed. We should talk about the models, because so there's two sides to this. I think the reveal of the Primaris Space Marines and the pictures that got out, and it sort of, I mean, they snuck out through leaks initially anyway. But then, as is GW's sort of style now, when they reveal a new model, they usually reveal it in like a 20-second video where you have to pause a blurry YouTube to get a look at it when it's not just sort of flashing in your face, which actually I think is a bad way to advertise models. I will say this. I think they should announce stuff when they are ready. I know they love teasing, but I think they kind of need to just, when they're ready to announce something, do the little trailer, but put a picture with it, like a really nice, high-quality picture, because otherwise it's people trading 480p blurry pictures of stuff.
Yeah, which doesn't show the model at its best. And they've got, on the web store, they've got like 360 shots, so maybe it's just too much work to do that, but like, that's the best way to show a new model, isn't it? If you can just rotate it with your mouse and have a look.
I mean, totally, but when those announcements started to sneak out, I think the Primaris Marines have completely completely dominated that discussion, and we should certainly talk about them.
Yeah.
But I think the thing that stood out to both of us is how good those Nurgle models
Absolutely.
are. Like, they, like, I collect Tzeentch stuff generally. I don't know what I'm going to do in 40k yet at all. And I wasn't considering getting any Nurgle stuff because those gods are kind of opposed, and I want stuff that I can ultimately use with my other stuff. But they're really, really nice. Like, and I was worried for a while that because they are super gribbly and weird and detail intensive, that they might be a bit more of a painting burden than, particularly because they have an element of horde units as well with the Poxwalkers, more than the Marines. But actually, they look like they'd be the most fun thing in the world to wash.
Yeah. They're really good under a wash. And it's interesting, their initial reveal of the Death Guard, which are the Nurgle Marines, there was studio painted, heavy metal, and they really go into the detail, and they, loads of crazy colour on there, really vivid and vibrant, the sort of stuff that looks good if you shine camera lighting at it and photograph it. But all the stuff we played with was just very basically painted. It was just like a base colour, a wash, and a couple of spot colours. And the Nurgle stuff looked absolutely fantastic, even with just that basic application of a few different colours and washes. And the silhouette that they have, like from the huge hulking commander to these noxious kind of grotesque Marines, just they have such good presence on the table. And the shambling zombies are these kind of, those models are fantastic as well.
And they're all grinning really broadly as well.
Yeah, they've got this rictus grin on their faces. The plague Marine, the plague drone, just looks like an amazing piece of concept art come to life, basically.
Yeah, like I said this when I was there, but like, I was looking at that, and I have the thing of army ideas coming into my head, and it's like, they get there, it like hooks into me, and that's when you do the window shopping thing of like, how much money would it cost to, like, I had that recently, just suddenly deciding, like, I kind of fancy doing Seraphon. I want lizard men. I want to paint some lizard men. And you do the window shopping thing, and then you back away, because I've been getting a lot better at just saying no to new projects and trying to finish the ones I've got. So, not doing it, but that kind of thing. And I totally had that looking at them, because that drone is gorgeous. It's so cool. And like, even the fact that it's flight stand, and they've got cool new flight stands for the Marines, but like this thing, its flight stand is its own kind of like tentacles that it's dragging underneath it.
Yeah, it's gross kind of mechanical entrails.
Yeah. And it's sort of, it's 50%, like, there's a lot of mechanical tendrils on the Imperium side in the Mechanicum. Like that's a thing, right? Servitor skulls on these kind of like, cables that kind of snake around.
Yeah.
And applying that and sort of Nurglifying it is great. It looks so good. But it made me think, like, man, I want to do joint Death Guard, Nurgle Demons, Dark Mechanicum, and like mash them all together into like just like gas masked kind of plagueman with the kind of shambling like servitor skull tentacles and stuff like that. Like,
amazing.
And I'm not going to do that, but looking at those models, like that's the point of a good model, right? You kind of go like, oh shit, this is this army that is sort of, being born in my imagination from looking at how evocative this miniature is.
Yeah.
So huge kudos to them for that, actually, because I think, both from the way they look point of view, but also from what it means for the game for Space Marines to be redesigned. Primaris of the news, but I think they really shouldn't go underestimated how good, particularly because actually I've realized I'm not a huge fan of the new Rubik Marines, the new Tzeentch stuff.
Right.
I think I am, but I feel like there are bits, I don't know, maybe we get onto it another time, but like, there's so much personality in the Nurgle stuff, and maybe the Tzeentch stuff necessarily is a little more staid. It feels like they're kind of boring people in really big hats rather than the Nurgle stuff that are literally dripping with.
They are made of dust though, aren't they?
Yeah, there is that. Like, it is hard to have loads of personality when you are dust in an ancient suit.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, but we'll see. But yeah, so let's talk about Primaris Marines, because they are the much taller elephant in the room.
Yeah, I love the Nurgle models for everything you described, but the Space Marine redesign is like a fundamental sea change for the entire 40k setting, just because it's such an iconic design, and it's been there since the beginning, and any update to that design it just really matters.
Yeah.
And what they've done is they've gone sort of true scale, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah, I think you could call it true scale Marine. Like, to the extent that, like, I think we have to accept Games Workshop are not really making 28mm scale miniatures games anymore.
Especially not since AOS.
Not since AOS. Like, and that's okay. It's just, you can't, if you put anything from these games next to a miniature for like a 28mm historical game.
Like The Hobbit.
The Hobbit.
Yeah.
It's just like, they're giants. It's just bigger. And you can say, oh, heroic scale, things are bigger. Bigger things are just bigger things at some point.
If all the things are equally heroic, then that becomes the new standard of big, that becomes the new normal, doesn't it?
So everything's getting bigger, and Marines have now caught up and exceeded that, basically.
Yeah. It's really telling that, so you can swap in shoulder pads and the heads from any of the Space Marine range from forever, which tells you everything about the design of the proportions, limb proportions.
Yeah.
The fact that they could keep the shoulder pads and the heads the same size and stretch the rest of the Marine shows you how mad the old Space Marine proportions are, and kind of, I love them, but they're how kind of dumpy, how small their torsos are, how small their thighs are, and that kind of stuff. So the new Marines are taller, but they've kept this bulk to them. So the thighs, they've got like an extra layer of plating that kind of maintains the silhouette of the Space Marine. But it's bigger, it's more imposing, and I don't know, I love the way they've posed the tactical Marines to look as though they're tactically assessing the battlefield, like looking around with their weapons slightly down or slightly to an angle, as though they could bring it up for snapshots. Yeah. The kind of state of readiness in the posture for the Primaris Marines that I think really suits the Space Marine fantasy.
And I think simply scaling them up in that way means that the shoulder pads haven't scaled up with them. Yeah. And it's kind of the benefit of, like, I think if they'd ever said we need to make the Space Marine shoulder pads smaller, that would be taken as like heresy, literally. that's that's probably the first heresy. Yeah. But it kind of was necessary, because I think it enables that sort of tactical sort of subtlety that you're kind of saying. Like, you can't really do like subtle arm positioning with a Marine when you only ever see half of their arms, realistically. Yeah. Like, a Space Marine is a sort of a dramatic man emerging from two halves of an egg that are, like, that are either side of him. You know what I mean?
The gun poking out the middle.
Like, yeah. And just that alone means that you pay more attention to what the rest of their body is doing. And guess what? When you pay more attention to what people's legs and arms are doing, you see more of their character. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Like, I mean, the flip side to this is like, maybe talk a bit more about Horus Heresy in a minute, but like, my 1,000 Sons, my 1,000 Good Boys have been, one of the most recent releases for them on the Forge World side is, I've completely forgotten what they're called. The melee elites. They have like I think it's Kanatai, but there's a lot of pretend. Yeah. There's a lot of pretend Egyptian words. I think it's Kanatai. We'll find out. And it's an upgrade kit. It goes over an existing kind of heresy era Marine body, and they dual wield like sickles, basically, like the kinds of things you'd see crossed on the chest of a pharaoh. And the arms are beautiful, but the limitations of that pose with the shoulder pads means the ways in which you can potentially pose a Marine holding two melee weapons, which should be a dramatic thing, looks super stiff and robotic and awkward. And I can now imagine what the Primaris version looks like, where they kind of rescaled the body a bit and suddenly they can hold them in dramatic ways. Whereas, like, I love so much of the Forge World stuff. We should get onto that, I guess, later in the pod, but like, that one model just doesn't appeal to me at all because of the limitations of that original Space Marine body, where they have to hold them like they're like a knife and fork. And that's the only way you can hold two things.
Right. Yeah. It was fascinating to talk to, we got a chance to talk to Tom Walton. Shout out to Tom Walton.
Indeed. And his beautiful Dreadnought, which we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah, we certainly will. And he's worked on a lot of the Space Marine stuff, and it's been years in the making from what he was suggesting, that like such a fundamental redesign of such a big part of GW's output. Obviously you'd expect it to take years, but it's interesting to hear that a lot of the design philosophy about it, behind it, and about how it's kind of, the new Space Marines are as much about expanding the design vocabulary of what a Space Marine thing can look like. Yeah. And that's kind of moving away from like boxiness to something that allows for slightly more organic shapes as well as that. This is embodied in the new kind of floating Terminator weapon platform dudes, whose name I forgot.
I think were probably the most contentious models when they were revealed.
Yeah, and I think the reason for that is because they contain they've got like a huge bulky jetpack that is got fins that, you can imagine angling as they hover to keep them afloat and to turn them. And all those shapes are quite rounded and organic, and like rounded jets and that kind of thing. And it was, those bulbous shapes you see in Eldar, it's like a different design
maybe
language. Tau
as well.
Tau, yeah. So, but elements of that have been brought into the Space Marine design very subtly, especially even in the Primaris Marines, where their breastplates are more rounded in the shape. And if you look at the new Dreadnought, the shoulder pads on the Dreadnought are slightly concave in a way that they wouldn't have been in previous Dreadnoughts. Yeah. They would have just been a box of big squarey, lots of sharp edges. So I think it's really interesting to look at the new Space Marines and how they look high tech, because in the design philosophy for Warhammer 40,000, big boxy, wibbly things that are really oil stained and have pipes and, rust, are Imperium and tens of thousands of years old. Whereas the smoother shapes, the more elegant Eldar shapes and the more elegant Tau shapes are the more technologically advanced societies. So it makes sense that to go up to Mark X armor, the Space Marines would gain some of that technological advancement and move forward into slightly more organic form. And I think that's also what the Primaris Marines represent. They still have the classic Space Marine silhouette, but the actual surfaces are allowed to be more flexible. They're allowed to bulge out and they're allowed to be more rounded, which is kind of a significant move. It doesn't sound like it, but I think that's quite a significant move. What Space Marines can look like. I
think, and this sort of ties into, I think one of the reasons they've been contentious, but I think one of the reasons that it's necessary is like that fiction, it sort of exposes the difficulty of having a fiction that I think fights the creation of new models and new shapes, because, the legacy of the Horus Heresy and the sort of the rise of the kind of hyper-religious imperial mindset, where modifying anything is heresy, where they've forgotten how to make half of the things they own, is a brilliant bit of sci-fi writing and subversive sci-fi writing, which is what Warhammer's always been so good at. It's not just being a genre, but undermining it. And saying like, okay, humans have these hyper advanced weapons, but they've forgotten how to make them. So if they lose them, that's it. And also, changing them creates like a religious cultural crisis. Like, it goes without saying, but like the fiction of the 41st millennium is like always somewhere between like, Judge Dredd and 13th century Europe. That's kind of where it is set. Like it is the future, but the future bears like all of the mistakes of the past at once. Like it's not Star Trek.
Yeah.
Like, they get there in the Horus Heresy where they basically meet Star Trek and go like, well, we don't agree with this, so we're going to set it on fire.
Such a good book.
It's so good. And like, but at the same time, and that fiction is brilliant for that reason. However, it doesn't have anywhere to go if that's, and like, and I think they're doing it in the right way where, a Primarch comes back who never necessarily subscribe to those ideas that you can't change things. Guilliman created the Codex Astartes. Like, there's, he's always been a kind of reformer and a change, someone who establishes new ways of doing things.
Relatively progressive for a Primarch,
And they have had to sort of parachute in Belisarius Cawl as a new character, as a kind of Archmagos who's been around for 10,000 years and has the expertise to do this stuff, which is, yes, it's a retcon, but there have been other characters like him in the 40k fiction. So there is precedent for Mechanicum Archmagoses who can come along and enact the plans of a Primarch. That's just something that can happen, right? And I like that they're doing it in this way where it's not, they are necessarily saying, not everyone's going to agree with this. Not every chapter in the fiction is going to be okay with this happening, but it has happened. There are new Marines and this is what they look like. And, yes, that can be divisive and yes, it can be upsetting. And yes, it can be upsetting from a hobby point of view because while actually when we saw them at Warhammer Fest, the new Primaris Marines don't actually look that bad next to old tactical Marines.
Yeah.
They look like the amazing new Marines that have come along, like bigger guys. And it seems to be that from the fictional point of view, Primaris Marines can be created out of other Marines, like as another round of gene treatment and that kind of thing. That seems to be implied by some of the fiction. Like some of them are new and some of them are like it's like a treatment, which I think leaving that at least a little bit fuzzy really helps because you could you can say that some of your veterans have then gone and have the Primaris treatment.
Oh, so you could also say that about a lot of hero characters.
Yeah, if they choose to update the models.
Yeah. Okay.
So that helps because that's the thing that looks really wrong at the moment.
Yeah, definitely.
Is Primaris standing next to like Cypher or somebody and it's like, like bless him, my tiny little son.
Seeing the small kind of the robed Dark Angels veterans next to Primaris for some reason looks quite balked.
Yeah. Because it looks like they're standing next to Jawas. And that's like...
yeah, it does actually. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's what I was thinking. But yeah, next to normal Space Marines, they're fine. And I think, from the range we've seen so far, there's still loads of space for Space Marine stuff, like, the new jetpacked Primaris Marines are not assault
No.
Jetpack
They're flying.
guys.
They're flying Terminators who are armed exactly like bikes, which makes them land speeders.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, exactly.
Land speeders are people now.
Yeah.
And so your Assault Marines still obviously have utility, and the Devastator squads have certain weapons that also give them like great utility.
Well, you pointed this out, that actually we haven't seen anything from the Primaris that's particularly melee focused yet at all. Like they're all like ranged specialists, really.
Yeah. Which is, reflected by the captains +1 to hit, or like they're supposed to just form fire squads, I think. And I bet they'll be pointed so that you can't take too many of them. So they really should be like a rarity in this universe. Yeah. I mean, I don't know, but we'll see.
The flip side of that fiction, and to bring us on to talking about it, because we got to sit in pretty close up, like the new Dreadnought. When they announced it, because it was designed by Tom Walton, and it's lovely. And because he came over to see it with us, we got to play with the army, the GW Army 1.
Yeah.
Not play with it in terms of rolling dice, like play with it in terms of like
rotate it endlessly and go, exactly. Ooh, look at that.
Like when I announced, I think when he teased that they were going to do a Primaris Dreadnought, or GW did.
They did, yeah.
I thought that didn't make loads of sense, because if, like, the Primaris haven't been around long enough to die and to be interned as Dreadnoughts. But, when we were talking to Tom, he pointed out that, like, I think the coffin in the middle is basically the core of an old Dreadnought. Yeah. And the idea is that, they have just ripped the sarcophagus bit out of the Dreadnoughts that are already in service and plugged them into a new, much bigger frame, which makes complete sense. Like, if I was a dead Marine from 10,000 years ago, I would want to be plugged into a fucking Titan. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Don't limit me to a box with legs that waddles at people and then punches them.
I think the first thing I said to Tom was, you've given the Dreadnought knees, which is the greatest gift anyone could have given the Dreadnought. I love those,
because the Heresy era Contemptor Dreadnoughts have knees.
Yeah.
So
who took them away?
At some point in the history of that 10,000 years, they just decided, you know what? Our venerated dead, they don't need knees.
They'll be fine.
It's more venerable to waddle
yes.
like a penguin towards whatever you're trying to kill.
Yeah, it's interesting because video games have brought these things to life, and then really feel sorry for the animator who first had to take on a Dreadnought as a walking machine.
Yeah.
And they've done a good job, like in Dawn of War and stuff, and Dawn of War 3, they're just big enthusiastic puppies that just sort of like bound forwards.
Yeah. But it's not right, really, is it?
It doesn't quite fit what they should be like. So they look, the new Dreadnought's so imposing and huge. It still has that broad-shouldered, boxy aesthetic, but it's just been normalized now, almost as a mech.
It feels like, and this comes across explicitly in the way that it's built. Cool talking to Tom about how the kit works, where it's built with the skeleton and then the armor plating on top of the skeleton, like a knight. And it feels like the Imperial Knight kit sets precedent for like how interesting and modular and expressive a vehicle or a walker design should be.
Yeah.
Like you look at that thing and it has kind of like, it's funny that, like, when back in the 80s, when they designed the Space Marine Dreadnought, they were designing a walker, right? Like a walking mech for the Space Marines. The fact that it is a dead person in a coffin with arms is the 40K-ishness of it, but in any other setting, it would be a manned mech, right? Like that is the role that it fits in the battlefield. And then you fast forward the fiction a little bit, not long actually, and multiple iterations of design and different waves of design thinking coming in at different times, and you get the Imperial Knight, which is not a totally dissimilar idea. It's a walker. It's a lot bigger. It is, in that case, and it's a person plugged into a chair, but like still, like it's a similar fantasy, and it has so much more kind of gravitas and sense of power, and it's so much more posable, and like, it's such a, frequent conversion piece because it looks so kind of spectacular.
Yeah.
And the 30K era Contemptor Dreadnoughts have kind of got there as well, because they're more expressive. They have faces, because they have the helmet sticking out of them. Even though that's silly. Why has it got a helmet? It's a dead person.
Yeah.
Where's the head? Like, all of these thoughts might occur to you, but like, still, it has more express. And that's what I really, really liked about the new Dreadnought, is like, it's still a coffin wearing armor. But, like,
yeah.
But it's like, you can see the freedom to like, give it personality, and for it to actually like, for you to kind of imagine how it moves without having to kind of unthink the waddling thing that they can't get around with the old one.
It's too late now, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a huge, it's really big as well.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. Like, It's funny because I think you said this yesterday, but like when we were sat playing with the Marines and the Nurgle, and there were no other older 40k models, like I completely forgot about the scale change.
Yeah,
like it just looked like Space Marines versus Nurgle, and like there's definitely a parallel universe where they decided that these weren't Primaris Marines, they were just Marines, and they were just doing a scale change, which I know some people would have preferred them to do if they don't like the fiction. You know, that's a personal thing. Like. You completely forget about the scale when you're looking at them. However, that Dreadnought is still massive. Much bigger than you think it is, I think, because like on the shelf that it was on, I only saw this in a photo later, it stood next to what I think might be a new Nurgle Dreadnought. Yeah. Which is closer to the old scale, also Dreadnought equivalent.
Smaller,
yeah, and it is like my gross son. Like
don't talk to my 10,000-year-old diseased son ever again. It's what Dreadnought should be like, and I think it's definitely going to be represented in the rules. I think Dreadnought's going to be a lot more powerful generally, but especially that Primaris Dreadnought.
Well, it feels like an update to the fantasy. I think that's probably what I would say across the board with new 40k stuff. It feels like a modernization of the old fantasy. So while Primaris Marines have new rules and they are a distinct thing from old Space Marines, the role they play on the battlefield is what you imagine a Space Marine would be doing. Yeah. Like when, we're both reading the 30k, the Horus Heresy novels, there is always going to be power creep in these games. And, I remember getting back into Warhammer and having to learn what MEQ was. And it's Marine equivalent. And it's because a Marine is the base standard of Warhammer. Like what is equivalent to a Marine in my army and how does it work? And maybe the relative strength of armies is totted up by the relative strength of their Marine equivalents, basically. Which is fine from a game system point of view, but is actually pretty bad from a fiction point of view or a feel point of view, because they're not supposed to be the baseline that everything else is measured from. They're supposed to be fucking Adeptus Astartes. Like they're supposed to be the most amazing thing on the battlefield. And it feels like every now and then you need to just do a pass and like move them up again. And maybe in 10 years we're talking about how everything is now a Primaris equivalent. And the scale creep kind of continues, and they're releasing like a 6-inch tall Chaos Space Marine to compensate.
And when we're 80-year-olds, every Space Marine will be as big as us.
Yeah, exactly. They'll finally be the right size.
Yes.
But like, I totally get why this is necessary, and it feels like a significant advance for that reason.
Yeah, and it's as someone who's kind of going to be getting back into 40k as a new player, really, after drifting away from it for a long time, it's such a good hook. Like, I want an army of Primaris Crimson Fists, straight up. That's the thing I want to collect now. And this fresh start gives me a really good way into having a Space Marine army. And also, that they're not going to update them for a long time, so it's going to be good.
Now's the time. Yeah, for sure.
I also love the way that the new edition of 40k, this is also partly thanks to the Gathering Storm narrative lead up to it, has reintroduced heroes into that fiction in a big way, heroes and villains as well. So having a Primarch come back, and Demon Primarchs are definitely going to be a thing. Well, we don't know for sure, but Mortarians. So come on.
The hilarious fucking thing about this is, they did a trailer for Mortarion, and they showed the corner of his scythe. Yeah. He kind of leaked earlier in the year, so everyone knows Mortarion, who's the Primarch of the Death Guard, is coming back, right? But there's been some like discussion about it, some like coy stuff. Like I remember, shout out to former PC Gamer writer Rich McCormick, now of The Verge, who sort of, he desperately wants, I think they made a reference to a cowled Primarch, as in wearing a cowl.
Yes.
And he desperately, as a Dark Ages player, he desperately wants it to be the lion. Right?
Okay.
And it's like, it's not, mate. It's going to be Mortarion. Because they keep teasing it. But obviously there's some like, but it's just a rumor. And then we were on like the train back from Coventry yesterday, and you opened the program, which we had looked through already, and the opening spread of the program where the fucking contents page is what is clearly a piece of new 40k art that hasn't otherwise been shown.
It's got Primaris Marines on it.
It's got Primaris Marines fighting Death Guard, Gilliman's in the background. No. And who is in the middle of that image?
Right in the middle of
it, flying towards Gilliman, but Mortarion in his entirety. Yeah. If you want to know what that model actually looks like, look at that piece of concept art. It's classic GW teasing where they've shown the corner of a scythe in a 20-second YouTube snap cut montage video, but put an entire fucking picture of at least the concept art for the model. Yeah. Right on the first page of the program for their annual event. So yeah, it's definitely Mortarion. But you're right, like, heroes and villains. Magnus is going to have a big role as well. Because he's a big red man. He's hungry for more planets.
So I love the idea of, surely they can bring back more of the Primarchs, and they're going to bring back more of the Demon Primarchs, which is a great way to evolve the story as well, because they're so, like, the character of those, from 30k, the character of those heroes is so well defined.
Yeah.
And they have such an impact on the character of their legions as well, which is great from a hobby perspective, because you can kind of carry through Mortarian's vibe into your Nurgle army, whatever it might be.
Yeah, actually, Mortarion is the reason I can't collect the 40k Nurgle army. Because he's such a dick. This is actually maybe a segue to get us on the thing I was going to do this month. He is such a prick to Magnus at the Council of Nicaea, which leads directly to the burning of Prospero several years later, that I can't really forgive him. As the father to 1,000 sons.
Yeah. You should read the fourth book of the Horus Heresy, Flight of the Eisenstein, is where Mortarion comes in. It's a story about the Death Guard, so that's the one you should pick up if you want to hate him even more.
I'll get them. I'm still on book 2.
He's good. He's good.
Like, but nonetheless, like, yeah, he's ironically, given how they're all going to go, he's very anti-Magnus during the Council of Nicaea.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Given what he's like.
But yeah, nonetheless. Man, that's an hour and a quarter on new 40k.
Yeah, it's important.
It is, yeah, it's huge. And like, so you're all in on Crimson Fists.
I think so. I think I'll mull over it, but that's kind of what I used to paint, and I love that colour scheme. I think it would look really good on Primaris Space Marines. Yeah. And I think with a bit of weathering and, really dark blue, the kind of...
Well, it solves that problem we were talking about last month, right? Like, you don't like Ultramarines blue, so...
Just go for the other blue guys but their story's really cool because they've been all but wiped out by the Orcs. So they would get Primaris, like they would be reinforced, I think. Like, Guilliman would say, look, you take a few squads and, rebuild the order. But I'm going to hold off in case they announce some new chapters, which I think they might do. I think Guilliman will form some new chapters as part of the new fiction. And if any of them take my fancy, then I might just go all in on a different
it's a cool time to kind of be there at the ground floor of a new thing.
Yeah, it's great to have Guilliman be a kind of, be the Emperor, basically. He's not, never will be, but functionally he's able to do things that the Emperor would do if he was around. He's kind of a proxy, which lets him just set up new chapters, change the Space Marines.
Be a giant dick for no reason.
Yeah, anything he wants. So yeah, it's a good time if you're into that fiction, I think.
Yeah. I don't know what I'm going to do because I really want to play it. I also want to maintain my commitment to getting through my existing projects. I'm going to AOS event at the beginning of September and I want my AOS stuff done. Like, I feel pretty confident about it.
Yeah.
But I have my kind of things, but like, I still love that setting. I love that game. I love those models. I want to do it. I did have the thought that, and I keep going back and forth on this because obviously, because I have a not insubstantial number of Tzeentch demons, that is a out of the box 40k army. Yeah. And maybe if I'm still working on AOS stuff and you start to go in the direction of 40k, we can play because we can do Crimson Fists versus Tzeentch demons and that works. However, the things I love about the 40k setting are actually fairly far from Tzeentch demons. Like, I really like Thousand Sons. I really like Ahriman as a character, and I could possibly go in that direction. But actually, I really like the machinery. I really like the kind of the feel of the... Like, I love the Skitarii models. Yeah. Like, Mechanicum generally. Like, I love that kind of industrial gothic thing. And actually, the kind of mad Tzeentch demon thing, which I love in AOS, where it feels kind of subversive and weird, doesn't quite fit what I love about 40k. So I'm trying to figure out whether... And this has some bearing on some model work, like... I was going to do my Lord of Change on quite a fantasy base, like use some of the AOS specific basing stuff that you could hand wave in a 40k setting, but it's not going to look right for 40k. It's going to be sort of like fantasy murals and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I have a decision to make about whether or not I want to make my demons setting agnostic so that I can potentially use them in both. Which I might do because it's tempting to just take my demons, add a couple of boxes of Rubric Marines. I already own Ahriman because Pip very kindly got me 40k Ahriman for Christmas, so I should have that model. Yeah. Like I could have 1,000, 1,500 point army pretty quickly, I think. But there's that temptation that like the thing I love about 40k is actually not the way Tzeentch is necessarily represented. Even the thing I love about the Thousand Sons, who I love as a legion and I love their story. Their 40k iteration is still trapped in amber. And I think there's so much to do in that fiction that I'd be amazed if they got around to advancing that anytime soon. Either for Chaos Space Marines more generally or for Thousand Sons specifically. Like, Ahriman has got, I suspect all parts of the fiction, some of them are going to be on pause for a while as the things move forward. Yeah. Ahriman searching for a cure for the Rubric and the Flesh Change and, trying to get into the Black Library to steal those secrets from the Eldar. Like, that stuff is just going to be happening forever, as far as I can tell. I mean, maybe they'll move that forward. Magnus's involvement maybe helps.
Yeah.
The fact that the planet of the sorcerers has been manifest in the like what's the
kind of real verse,
in the real verse, Immaterium, Empyrean, blah blah blah.
Immaterium's the warp space, isn't it? I don't know.
It's the thing I can't pronounce. But I'm seeing the word with my mind vision.
Brains.
That thing, is manifest over Prospero. There is some meaningful development and tempted, but part of me is tempted to just go do Dark Mechanicum or something.
I think it's just a really good opportunity to paint differently. And you can really paint completely differently in 40k. And that's one of the things that I really took away from Warhammer Fest and seeing the two ranges, is that I got super increasingly luminous with my Stormcast.
Yeah.
So especially the long strikes I've done, they're really really bright blue gradients everywhere, shining gold. And that is the AOS to me. It's that gleaming, incredibly colourful, really push the contrast to make it look, gorgeous in that way. But then seeing like a Forge World army or a kind of a really well painted Space Marine army that Games Workshop produced, it's all these beautiful matte colours, and it's a very different type of universe.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe this actually brings us on to like kind of the painting hobby side of this month for us. Because I totally have had that feeling. Like I've realised with regret that I think I'm pleased with my Thousand Suns so far. I've got all my unit in the works. But actually I think I made a mistake, like quite a big mistake. And I stand by the decision to do them in metallics because it feels right. But like when I came to basing them, I used the same sort of philosophy of what a base should look like that I was using for my AOS stuff, which was that I want a base to act as a kind of a poppy background, with a view to the idea that you're going to look at these models from kind of like above and at a slight isometric kind of tilt.
Yeah.
You want the model to kind of leap off the base, the model itself, not the kind of holistic kind of entirety of all of the plastic things, but specifically, the model begins at its feet, that kind of thing. And then the more heresy stuff, the more heresy models I've seen and the more heresy stuff I've read, I've realized actually no, I want the model to begin at the plastic bottom of the base, which is a different way of thinking about it. And it means like, it's almost like each individual model is like a little scene where the base has to be complementary to the model and maybe even not clash, but like even sort of absorb some of the kind of contrast a bit. So I did my Marines, I thought I was being clever at the time, in Space Wolf colors. I did the bases in Space Wolf colors because that Thousand Suns Red just bursts off it, which I think I stand by the kind of color theory side of that, but actually I think it's wrong for Horus Heresy. So like the thing, I did a test one today, but like the thing I'm going to commit to now is I'm going to rebase the entire lot of them with a kind of desert, much more grounded, much more realistic, kind of warmer thing to kind of like absorb some of that red and kind of make them look like they belong. I'm also going to weather all of them. Having justified having the kind of clean armor, I now would like them to look more like they belong. Like, and that's from seeing how other people have done it, but also, my big kind of splash out, treat myself purchase this month because it came back in stock was Horus Heresy Book 7. Which is Inferno, which is the
beautiful thing
I showed you earlier. Yeah. Like that book. I mean, it seems crazy. Like if you told me when I got back into this Hobbit, when I got back into this Hobbit a year ago,
he was very pleased to see you.
He was delighted. But when I go back into the hobby, notwithstanding that, when I go back into the hobby, if you told me like you're going to spend £80 on a book, then I would think you were mad, and I might have been mad to do that, but oh my god, that thing is fucking amazing.
Yeah, I wish that existed for
everything else.
Everything else, like if I could do that for like a 40k army.
So clarity, like this is functionally the equivalent of an army book for the Horus Heresy setting. It's its seventh book, but it is like a leather bound, several hundred pages. Feels like a copy of the Encyclopedia Britannica. Its corners are capped with metal, which have the Imperial Aquila stamped into them. The pages are edged in silver, so when you close it, so it has a ribbon. For fuck's sake, it's a book with a ribbon. And it's fucking amazing. Like, it's such a treat as someone who's into that fiction. And it is like it's written like a history book, like a big tome, and most of it is history of the historical. It is some future iterator remembrances thesis on the events of the burning of Prospero, which is treated entirely as a historical event. If you know how the Horus Heresy stuff tends to be told, this is not a surprise, but like, it is not treated as a bit of modern fiction, a bit of modern sort of genre fiction. It is, we are going to explain the political surroundings of this event that happened. And the amount of detail, it has rules in it. It has rules at the back for the new units and things like that. But most of it is just dense text for hundreds of pages with amazing art.
Yeah, really great art.
Like, and deep, like, and maps. And then it was seeing like maps of Tizca, which is the last city on Prospero, the burning of Prospero scenarios that we're playing through in that game, all set in Tizca, gets a map in that book that is presented like, almost like Google Earth photography. Like, it's obviously completely fictional, it's a labeled map, but it looks like a real place. It looks like Cairo or Baghdad. Like, it, you know, you can imagine, like, you can see on the map, you can see the kind of pyramid temple complexes of the cults of the Thousand Suns, which is the sci-fi element of it. But beyond that are city streets, and like, you can see water treatment plants and beaches and kind of city outskirts and slums, and it feels real.
Yeah.
And that was when I decided from a hobby point of view that like, oh shit, I need to rethink how I've been approaching heresy. And actually, I thought I was at the time. That's the stupid thing. Like, I thought I was doing the metallics. I thought I was, you know, approaching it in a suitably different way, but I need to go even further. And I think maybe that, this has been a long monologue for a simple point, but like, that has made me think that like, maybe if I do a new 40k army, I want it to be different as well. And that I should have one painting style for AOS, one painting style for Heresy, and one painting style for 40k.
Yeah.
And that means that maybe bringing my demons through to 40k just because I can isn't the right thing to do. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think maybe you could bring them through to game with, but maybe it feels as though you wouldn't be necessarily satisfied to put it on a shelf as a 40k army. And it'd be really interesting to kind of discover what the differences are between 40k and Horus Heresy, like how you approach painting. It's very interesting to see the Horus Heresy armies that were at Warhammer Fest, because they made excellent use of coloured metallics that, for example, the Emperor's Children are purple and gold, incredibly ostentatious colour combination. But the way they did it, it was so dulled down and just like worn and recognisably the right colours, and still had like glittered and kind of shone a little bit. But it didn't look like a 40k army. Like somehow it was just a different level of grime and kind of ancient machinery.
Yeah, totally. Like, and some of that 30k stuff, actually, I don't necessarily like the way it looks. I love the models. Like, there's a lot of the 30k stuff, the 412 stuff is painted like weirdly, like you might paint a sort of airfix model of a World War II fighter or something. It's sort of material realism first.
Yes.
And it photographs extremely well. I think at a tabletop level, actually, it doesn't necessarily look...
It risks being swallowed by the mat or the tabletop itself, perhaps.
And I'd like to find a middle ground there. I think actually, like, when I say it's kind of just the basing that bothers me about my current Thousand Suns. Like, I feel like once I've based them and weathered them, I'll be at a place I really like, where it's kind of somewhere between the two things. In fact, and doing that test one today, I was like, this will work. Like, and it's not too much work, so it'll be pretty, I think, painless, just time, basically. But it's made me more conscious that, like, I really love feeling like I'm contributing something to that particular fiction in each case. So I want to just, like, with the Harlequins, which is my hobby thing for this month, and, you know, dwell on it too much, but like, I'm building those Harlequins for Shadow War. They're going to be a particular group of Harlequins that fight in a particular place at a particular time, and I'm not necessarily going to build them in a way that means I can expand out into having a Harlequins army. Yeah. Because A, I don't want to paint that, but also B, I like focusing. I would rather focus than not.
Yeah, I'm currently building out my, I've got a box of Skitarii, and at Warhammer Fest I picked up a Tech Priest, who can be run in Shadow War. If in future you get like certain points that let you hire hero characters
basically
for a round.
You can either cash in your caches for either 100 points to spend on your army or one use of a character for one game.
So I picked him up knowing that he might turn up in Shadow War, but secretly really could have a Skitarii Admech army in new 40k, and also just as a kind of small scale hobby project where I get to use the cool braces that you've given me, Chris, to create like I can imagine if I just have about 20 of them, doing a display board for them and just kind of having those bases slot into that and having that be on a shelf. Like, it could go in so many different directions. And that's actually more broadly talk about GW stuff. As a hobbyist, I feel as though all of my stuff has multiple applications now. So I can take, any collection of models I have and take them into Skirmish or take them into Shadow War or turn them into a display board and take them to Armies on Parade. Like, everything can do lots of different things, both in a gaming sense and in a hobby sense. Yeah. Which is kind of what seems to have emerged over the last couple of years, perhaps just because of the sheer scale of stuff they've released. But yeah, I'm really excited about building up those Skitarii. I took a little photograph of one of the beautiful display cabinets at Warhammer Fest where they showed off the kind of John Blanche models that have been produced.
If the Pilgrim.
Yeah. So if you've read White Dwarf, the last few months they've been running regular spreads on this where people have done incredible like modifications to existing 40k stuff and then painted it in a very John Blanche kind of ochres and greys style to like incredibly grimdark gothic look. And I absolutely love that. I'm just going to rip it off wholesale for my Skitarii. Yeah. And so I literally photographed it and that's going to be my colour reference now.
It's going to be really interesting seeing them up against my Harlequins, which are like
so
kind
different.
Of 80s cyberpunk.
Yeah. That's so awesome. I can't wait for them to fight because both their rules are like diametrically, like completely opposed. Like you do one thing, I do the shooty thing.
I do running, jumping, stabbing,
terrifying,
theatre.
And which is awesome as well. I was thinking about this because like, the Skitarii, I don't have any sense of aesthetic culture. They've got no interest in what theatre is.
Like a Harlequin causes fear when it charges you, and that's because its mask is supposed to be changing to show your worst fears.
Right.
Like, and the whole thing is supposed to be the thing. And Skitarii have really high leadership, which means both mechanically and sort of in the fiction, they don't care. Right. It's like, I don't really understand art.
Can I turn this 1 to a 0 and therefore win the scenario? So I think it's going to be a really fun game. I think we're going to go to the local Games Workshop store where they'll have lots of scenery for it.
That might well be a next month thing.
Yeah, that'd be cool to get that project together. But yeah, they're kind of so philosophically opposed and the painting styles will be so different as well from my approach to these guys and your approach to the Harlequins. Yeah. So that's a really, really exciting prospect. Yeah.
Speaking of painting, we should talk about Golden Demon.
Yes.
Because we specifically went to Warhammer Fest on the Sunday because that's the Golden Demon day to see the entries. We managed one proper lap and it's quite early in the day, like after the entries had gone in. And we went in. That is the best time to go because the way it works is people enter their models and then as the day goes on, models get taken away for photographing if they're good and further judging if they're good and then eventually just get taken away for collection if they have not made the next round. And there was definitely the experience of going around at the beginning of the day and looking at things and obviously some of it is just incredible. And some of it is like, I could do that. And then inevitably you go back an hour later and all of the stuff you could do is gone.
Yes. It's the way they do it, the way they slowly remove things until only the best is left. It's just the gentlest way of letting everyone know what the standards are. So yeah, absolutely. It was interesting to see that. And it's just incredible to see the best stuff. But the stuff that really inspired me was the stuff I could almost, like in a year, maybe I could do that actually if I just learned how to do this stuff.
I was talking to Pip about this earlier. Yeah. And it's like, it felt like, at the highest level is like, I am 10 years from this. Yeah. And maybe even it's too late because that 10 years already needed to have happened. Right. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, and then you're right. Like, and that was the stuff that was, the winning the big prizes. Like, it might be worth talking about some of that stuff quickly before we get onto the stuff that was actually like achievable.
Yes.
Because, like, for example, there's a Nagash diorama. Nagash?
Nagash
from Bath. Nagash diorama, which was also Adepticon.
Yes.
Did the rounds of the internet. It's an insane piece of work.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
Because I think it's almost unfair that qualifies for one of the categories. Because there's the free-for-all category, people enter whatever. Yeah. I'm not saying it should be in that category. This is not a serious argument for it not to be in the category it's in, which I think was diorama.
Yeah.
But it's basically a scratch build, right? Like, it's not a diorama constructed out of existing Warhammer miniatures, really.
I think there are bits of Nagash in there.
Yeah. But it's functionally, in the first instance, a piece of sculpture, which is a vampire count kneeling before Nagash in his throne room and behind Nagash. Nagash's throne is made up of what looks like a kind of fountain of like frozen souls, and it just looks amazing. That is incredible. And then the paint work, it's so good. You look at it and just accept it immediately. It's like, guess that's what that looks like. That's what that frozen piece of 3-dimensional fantasy concept art looks like. Because it's all non-metallic metals, which is where you paint metal by doing all of the shading and the highlighting with matte paints. So it's not metal, it's not paint with metal pigmentation or metallic pigmentation. It's just hand blended insanity.
Fools the eye completely when you first glance at it. You think, oh, that's a shiny armor he's wearing. Then you look at it and it's like, wait a minute, he's fucking done this.
A human painted this, yeah.
Yeah, and what the amazing effect that has is that you can look at it from any angle, and the lighting conditions are the same, and the kind of the composure of the shot is the same, and it carries the same vibe if you're looking at it from this angle or that angle, and it creates the same focal points from wherever you're looking at it. And the focal point is, of course, on Nagash himself, and there's this beautiful gradient on the stone steps where the vampire is kneeling, where the vampire is like bathed in like almost like a pillar of light, it looks like. And if you just look at the texturing on that stone alone, I would not even know how to start painting it.
It's something you said once, which was that, like, I don't know if it was on the pod or not, but was that, like, a lot of miniature painting, a lot of the appeal of miniature painting and the satisfaction of it comes from the fact that it takes away a lot of the hardest parts of, like, true creativity. The stuff that remains the preserve of artists is dealing with the blank page, right? Like, you know, and this is the interesting thing, right? Because you can actually draw to a pretty high standard. I can't. We can both paint to a reasonably decent standard. And that's because for me, the hard part, the thing I can't do, creating something from scratch, is taken care of. And what's left is the technique and the selection of colours and the execution of ideas. It feels like at the highest level of Golden Demon, the artists take over again.
Right, for sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
you get out of the territory of what one person can do with a bit of practice and a pre-made model, and into what one person can do with functionally a blank canvas, which is scratch building.
Yeah.
And this, for me, is that. It's like, this is a piece of three-dimensional concept art created by someone who is a phenomenally talented artist. And that's why I think I kind of joke about it almost not belonging in the same category as like someone painting the Glotkin extremely well.
Yeah,
you know
there are a lot of those, and there
were a lot of extremely good Glotkins.
Yeah, there's one that stood out, but
yeah, we should talk about the amazing Glotkin. But I bring it up as an example because, like,
yes,
for me, that Nagash thing was set in a separate thing because it was like there was, you know, that phenomenal Glotkin diorama. Like, the Glotkin, if you're not aware, is like a great demon of Nurgle being ridden by like Nurgle sorcerers who are all brothers. That's you know, as a concept. And a very popular model, it seems, because a lot of different textures, a lot of detail, multiple characters in one large model. So for those sort of diorama and large model categories, popular choice.
Rich choice.
But it's definitely a Warhammer model produced by Games Workshop. You know?
Yeah.
Whereas, which someone had painted to an extremely high standard and framed in a beautiful way. That Nagash diorama is not a model produced by Games Workshop. It is a 3D piece of art inspired by characters and themes from Games Workshop's products. And that was, I mean, and of course that belongs in that category. It deserves to win everything, to be honest.
Which it did, got the Slayer Sword.
Which it did. But at the same time, there's like, almost like a philosophical distance
right.
between it and everything else. Like,
yeah. Which is why I really liked the category that was just, everyone had to paint the same Eldar model.
Yeah.
And there's a whole category about that because it gave everyone the same canvas and it took all that away and it said, look, just execute this in the best way. And it was really interesting because you could look at it very quickly and say that hasn't worked as well as that. Like, or that's amazing and that's a different level to this. And it's amazing how quickly you can just like spot the quality difference and the execution difference on that just one model from when they're all there in a cabinet. And obviously, you know, it's going to be even easier for the judges who are really seasoned, amazing painters at Games Workshop. And that was fascinating to me because like there are a couple that I saw in that cabinet that's like those two are just amazing. Like, that's perfect contrast, beautiful colours, amazing freehand in the right parts. And it's like, I'd love to see which one actually ended up winning. But that gave everyone that level playing field. It said, okay, if you can't scratch build, if you can't sculpt, which are incredibly advanced, you know, artistic techniques that you can't expect the average hobbyist to even attempt, really, then enter this and just paint it as well as you can. And maybe the single models, is also a good category for that. But then you see people putting that creative sculpting effort into the bases. Yeah, which do end up having a huge effect on the model, and that was interesting.
Like, there was a beautifully painted Dark Earth Chieftain who's the barbarian hero from Silver Tower. Oh yeah, saw quite a lot of them. There's a lot of Silver Tower models, actually, because they're great models.
It's great to see. Yeah,
one of them was stood on like a sort of temple floor base or a ruined floor, but it was elevated maybe 3 or 4 inches, and that entire 4 inches was taken up with like a kind of winding cavern system that was underneath him with like dripping stalactites and pools and moss and stuff. And so you're almost getting a glimpse into the floor underneath this adventure, which is a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
But it is where that extra creativity is coming through, but also a completely different skill set. You know,
right?
It was really interesting, and so that's, I guess, and that Glotkin that don't want to keep right. There must be a photo of it somewhere online. Like, so it was. There were quite a lot of the Glotkin. This one was sort of like bursting through like a graveyard gate in a forest that was lit in sort of like nocturnal blues and greens, like real, you know, as in sort of object source lighting, not just sort of like a piece of art designed to be viewed from a particular direction, with like a skeleton emerging from a pool of sort of like a slimy pond, which was on the cutaway of the base, so that, you know, the pond was constructed from some kind of gelatin
or resin. I think that people like you layer it. There are lots of ways of doing it, but you can layer resin until it becomes a glass, essentially.
Right,
you can preserve stuff inside.
So
it.
you could peek like through the base to see the skeleton's legs, sort of like churning up dirt at the bottom of the pool. It's like, this is madness.
Insane, isn't it? And the Glotkin was astonishingly well painted, I thought.
Yeah, same.
It was just it was almost luminous. The colours, the bright kind of green, almost like a lime green, but in the context of this blue dark forest, it just kind of really came out of it at you. And it's just really smart stuff, like on the horns, where there's this gradient through from like browns up to green or reds closer to the Glotkin, but in the middle and between they have the blue shine of moonlight on it. And if you really look closely, it's such an odd combination of colours, but when you step back, it all just coheres into this instantly. You just accept it all completely as a scene, as a frozen moment in time, which is the diorama. That's the art of the diorama. And it was amazing to see what was successful and what was less successful, and look at why it didn't kind of work.
Yeah.
And it was almost always for me about the wider fantasy of the model, where you could have a couple of like really dark characters dueling, but they'd be dueling on like a meadow. And there's a tonal contrast there that just doesn't really work or make sense when you look at it. So it's having the fantasy from start to finish throughout the model being consistent and being this great vision, as well as the execution of all those painting techniques, and really good.
And that was at the far end of like sheer time miles from this,
right?
Like, so we're talking about the stuff in the middle, because I think I found it really helpful actually, because it's not useful to look at things that I could already do. Like, it's nice to see, because it's nice to think that you've got a place in this community, but it's not useful, really. Like, you know, but what is helpful is seeing things that, like, look better than what I can do, but have been achieved with techniques that I recognize. Because there are levels of blending expertise and, you know, just technique that, with the amazing stuff that, is just so far ahead of where I am, basically. That's definitely worth accepting. Like, I think one of the first things I came away from this year, like, part of it was, like you just said, the right base selection. I already talked about how that's changed the way I felt about my Horus Heresy stuff.
Yeah.
The thing I came away from was 2 realizations. One is I want to learn better fine line highlighting, which is a very specific thing.
Yeah.
And the other half of that is I want to get more confident doing bigger contrast, like bigger, brighter highlights. Because I noticed a lot of the models that really popped had like highlights that I wouldn't have considered. Like, not because I wouldn't have thought of it, because I would have dismissed it. Because I was like, no, that is too bright. Like, that is too much of a leap between 2 colors. Like, maybe particularly since getting a wet palette, I've tended to blend a lot. And I love doing subtle gradients and things, and that's been a big feature in some of the stuff I've been painting this month. And I wouldn't necessarily think to the harsh highlights that you see on some of these models that just really pop and look great because of them. The flip side to that is the reason they look good is because they've been achieved with a degree of sort of fine highlighting that I know I struggle with. And that's helped me recognize something about my own painting that I want to fix, which is that I think because my like fine highlighting isn't that fine, really, and there's something to do with brush control and paint thickness and things that I just need to get my head around.
Yeah, same here.
I tend to rely on sort of more expressive brush strokes when highlighting things, which I think actually is fine for AOS, weirdly. I think you and I are similar in that we both have quite a brush strokey painting style. Like, you can see the brush strokes, and that doesn't necessarily even look bad, necessarily. I'm not talking about dry brushing, I'm talking about, like, having some sort of, like, concept arty feeling models because they've been painted with sort of like dramatic brush strokes,
painterly kind of vibe. Yeah,
we both could go for that, and it's not right for 40k. Really, you know what I mean? That's an interesting thing to both hit this month. Is like, and so I've come away from that going like, okay, I want to learn to do this, and that's been a really helpful thing, is to go like, I want to just step away and figure out how to do good sharp line highlights, and then my entire game will elevate in a different way.
Yeah, so the thing I'll be focusing on this month has been using glazes to create gradients, particularly on concave surfaces like Stormcast shoulder pads, where it actually goes from dark to light imperceptibly, from the dark colour to the light colour. And it's the first time I've actually managed to achieve it on Stormcast, but it takes ages, obviously. But I can kind of, once it semi-works, you kind of know how it's supposed to work. It's almost like doing it right once, it's suddenly all it takes. If only you could experience what it's like to do it correctly physically once, then you'd have that reference point. But that's what's so hard to achieve with these models that are astonishingly good, is that there is no reference point for me about how to achieve all those skills and effects. And maybe that's where going to, like, people do classes and stuff like that. There's loads of great resources online and YouTube and stuff, but it's almost like I have to reach up and take some tuition from somewhere to actually gain a level of understanding about how paint works and how to move it around. And yeah, it was very interesting to see Golden Demon. Likewise, I struggle with like that really fine highlighting stuff. I could achieve it easily if it's like a hard edge, where you just do the side brush thing, and it's really easy as long as you're careful. It's the stuff where you're having to create loads of contrast in a very small space, and that works really well for your eye because it picks out all that detail and it makes it look like suddenly way more detailed than the model even is. Like the painting accentuates the detail that's already there. And that's the stuff I can't do, like filigree on the edge of capes, that kind of thing. You know, the stuff that really makes a model look like it's a tiny version of a bigger thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I took so much away from it. I mean, it's weird because we were only there for a few hours, Warhammer Fest, but I really feel inspired now to get better.
Same. Like, I just wanted to do more. I think it's a time thing that I feel with
yeah, for sure. And I loved the Silver Tower diorama piece, which was, it's like a realm gate, and there was a lot of change coming out of it. And there were just 3 Silver Tower heroes facing off against it, and just the colours, and it was painting that almost lurid AOS style, which is completely right for Silver Tower. It's bang on, and it was absolutely gorgeous. And it could have been a piece of concept art in the book. I'd be amazed if that didn't win something. It was great.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I'm going to have to do proper show notes for this episode, aren't
I?
yeah.
A lot of pictures.
Oh, well, it depends how much stuff is online, actually.
Yeah, true. Surely they'll photograph it.
Yeah, I think I'll have a dig around, see if I can find any resources for Golden Demon pictures, because there's a lot of great stuff.
There's a lot on Twitter.
Like, well, to bounce off that into regular pod stuff, what have you been painting this month? What have you been doing?
So I've done 2 things. I painted up some Vanguard Raptors with long strike crossbows, which are basically the Vanguard snipers, who are, like, they're huge. They're taller than normal Stormcast. They're taller than Retributors. For some reason, they're really tall, but it's because they've got these enormous sniper bows, crossbow things, and they come with like a load of Aether wings. So that's been my project this week, but it's been fairly standard Stormcast painting, but trying to push the blue and stuff and trying to learn that gradient stuff, which I've already described. The other thing I've been doing is painting scenery. And I really recommend painting scenery if you just kind of want to break from the hard stuff. Scenery is really fun. Like, it's really, really fun to just undercoat something, dry brush it up, and then add some like washes to dirty it up, and then dry brush it again, then do some metallics on it. It's just really just satisfying part of painting without all the kind of hard stuff that you get from intricate models. So I'd really recommend, if you've got the space to store it, is the main barrier really. Pick up one of GW's relatively affordable scenery kits. You can get for £10 you can get like a throne thing. You can get the vortex that you use, Chris, for your Gaunt Summoner, and then for like £20 you can get big terrain sets, like the really old terrain sets that they've had for like 15 years. But they're relatively inexpensive now, and the plastic isn't great, and it takes work. It takes some green stuff. But once you've got it together, actually painting it and having something on in the background is a really relaxing and nice experience, and it looks quite good. And the fun thing I did this month was kind of kit bash a dark ritual gone wrong, a corn ritual gone wrong together from a set of you get a set of like dark pillars, which comes with like a base. So I didn't use the pillars on the base. I used the vortex on the base and painted it all up in red, highlighted it all, and then gave it a wash of what's the blood paint? Blood for the Blood God. How did I forget that?
It's got the word blood in it twice.
Yeah. And once you've laid that over, it looks like a glistening kind of whirlwind of blood.
Bloodnado.
Bloodnado. And then I took some of the Marauders from the starter set, because I'm never going to collect Corn Force really, and I stuck them around it as though they and then painted them on a stone, as though they'd been turned to stone in a mad ritual, and now all their souls are in the Blood Tornado. And there's a little kind of weird, very Warhammery story behind it, and it just kind of, it looks alright, and it's quite themey, and it makes your models look really good when they're on it.
Yeah.
Which is the main thing, which is why I've gone with really dark colours for my scenery, it's just so that the models are really the star rather than the scenery itself. So I felt like that was a success. I was quite pleased with it. You can, oh, by the way, you should follow us. We've got a Twitter account now.
Oh, yeah, shit. We'll mention this at the end as well.
We'll mention it at the end as well, but with, at Minis Monthly, we post a load of work in progress stuff that we're working on. So there are pictures of that there. There will be some in the show notes, but it's just that if you want to keep up with just silly stuff I'm doing with scenery, then that's a good place to follow.
Yeah. And that's, it's nice. I mean, it's a really cool diorama scenery piece that you've done, because I realized that, like, using it today for our skirmish games, which we'll talk about shortly, I realized that I wasn't really, like, differentiating it in my mind from things like the Oculum and the kind of official scenery kits. Like,
it kind
it
of feels like its own
seamlessly
thing.
like, into that.
And all of that was just having loads of bits of plastic and kind of holding them together and kind of seeing, would this work maybe? And just kind of trying to create something different. I'm kind of feeling less, the problem I've always had since I started the hobby again, like more than a year ago, is that I've been bound into the GW way of painting and doing things so heavily that, and I haven't really had the bits to kit bash stuff, but now I've got enough bits around, I feel more confident. I can actually create new things that put my own personal stamp on it, and that's really exciting. That's the thing I'd like to do much more this year, next year.
Like a Bloodnado.
Like a Bloodnado, and it's just the start of many mad things I'm going to do with bits I have in my bits box.
I think they'll all be Bloodnados, Tom.
Maybe I'll just make loads of them.
Exactly.
All scenery is Bloodnados now. It's great because there's screaming faces in that vortex.
Yeah.
So it looks like their souls are actually in there, just endlessly screaming, which is the most corn thing ever.
Because they don't want to be inside the Bloodnado.
No, that's it.
Yeah, and it's nice because it's like, actually, even though it's exactly the same piece as my Belwyn vortex.
Yeah, it looks really different.
Like, it looks really different because mine is like Starscape.
Yeah.
Like, kind of like Zinjnado.
Which really
Starnado.
is perfect. And it looks amazing when you put your Gaunt Summoner on it. Like, there's a continuation of the colours.
Yeah, because the top colour of the Tornado is the bottom colour of his robe. So because the idea is like, I kind of want it to be an extension of him.
Yeah.
So, like, yeah.
But the Corn Bloodnado does not care for gradients. It cares only for blood.
Blood for the Blood God, not gradients for the gradients God.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, so my month has been, my month started out with Thousand Suns, which is the same process I've described already. But since then I decided that I was just going to do the Harlequin's idea that I talked about. So I've done 2 of them now, sans their bases, which still need doing. And it's been an interesting project because the idea behind them, which I think I spoke about in a previous episode, is that I want to do a Harlequin Shadow or Warband where each Harlequin is different. Unifying that has been interesting. Like, the whole thing has been really interesting to do, even though I've only painted 2.5 models so far. Maybe I'll finish the 3rd by the time this podcast goes up. And it's a 3-model warband, but like, it's been interesting in a way that doesn't necessarily speak to like techniques I can talk about, because it's been a lot about choices of design and style. Like I said at the time, that I wanted to do Harlequins, but inspired by like 80s cyberpunk art and like modern, like, you know, electronica and art pop stuff that's inspired by the same thing, basically. And try and express things in a different way. And like, it's really fun to do. And I'm pleased with the 2 Harlequins that I've finished, and pleased with my color choices. And like, a lot of it is just like, a lot of it is more on like the design side than the execution side. But the flip side to that is it's really made me aware that like, this is a strong idea, but the idea is as good as my ability to execute it. And I know that a better painter than me could make this amazing. And that's the thing. Like, I think so with some projects, like painting a Space Marine or, you know, painting a Horus Heresy miniature or anything like that, there's like a ceiling on like how meaningful it is to be just amazing at every possible technique. Like, if you are an amazing freehand painter and you're painting a Stormcast, provided that you're not doing something completely mad, there's probably not going to be much difference between you doing it and someone who's just doing, you know, like two people painting a gold and blue Stormcast. You know what I mean? There's going to be like a different thing. Yeah. Whereas because Harlequin supports so much potential freehand and so much potential kind of variation, like, I feel like I could return to this idea in 10 years, 15 years if I keep it up and do the correct version of it. So it's been gratifying to do it to the level that I'm capable of doing it, but there's also been like a persistent feeling of like every single skill involved in this, from painting gradients to blending to highlights to freehand, I could be better at than I am. And I'm having to kind of accept, like, this is as good as I can do this now.
Harlequin's
okay.
Harlequin's a hard mode though. Like,
it is,
by any standards, that army is the hardest to paint in the 40k range. Like, bar none, for sure, given that their whole thing is crazy circus freehand forever.
Yeah. And I've done some freehand. Like, I'm kind of pleased with the freehand I've done. The lines aren't as sharp as I would like them. They don't look like the picture in my Marine. But the effect is there. And so, to the extent that we still do, like, tips and stuff, like, I have learned stuff. Like, it's still progress. It's just that it's not the satisfying progress of, I have painted a Space Marine and it is comparable to other Space Marines.
Right.
It's more like, I've painted a Harlequin and this is mine. And like, and there are deliberate things, like and I've learned things about different choices. So like, I've done the two I've done so far have monomolecular blades and masks that I'm doing half in glass and half in like ceramic. And a lot of the work has been in bringing out different materials.
Right.
And so I've started using things like hard stuff, which is like almost gloss varnish, basically, to bring out glass. And trying to paint black glass that is kind of illuminated from within, but with like contrasting colours. That's fucking hard. Yeah, and I've gotten like some of the way there, but obviously you could just be a million times better at that and it would just be better. Like one of the Harlequins has a decent amount of freehand on it. The other one doesn't, but deliberately, because I wanted to make it look like it was sort of shifting between colours. So it's one that starts with, it's one I posted a picture of, but the picture's quite dark, so you can't really see this, but it's one kind of contiguous gradient from green through purple to orange, individually highlighted, which I'm pretty pleased with how it comes out. I think it's a cool looking model on the table, but it's like that, even that idea could be so much better. My kind of tip, if I was going to do a tip for this month, is pencils. Pencils are okay. You're allowed pencils. Like,
yeah, interesting.
So I did a kind of mad geometric line pattern for the chest of one of the Harlequins, which has come up pretty well, I think. But that started with me drawing it on the model in very fine pencil, so I knew where to put the to put the paint. Because when you're trying to, because freehanding straight lines, like this is a pattern made of triangles, like freehanding paint straight lines is hard enough as it is, without also trying to maintain the even distance between lines and stuff like that. And pencils are great for that. And I found that the paint has gone on. I mean, it helps that I think I was doing black over white. So the grey silvery pencil line vanished under the black paint. Yeah. But using pencils as a basis for freehand, like I always thought it would be heresy to take a pen or a pencil to a model in order to plan something out. But actually this month I've kind of seen the benefit of it. And I think I will keep doing that for any freehand I do. And because I find it much easier to draw with a pencil, that's going to make me a little bit braver with freehand, I think, generally. Yeah. I can sort of block things out a little bit and sort of figure out ways of making that happen. Yeah. Right. I guess your tip for this month, Tom, is terrain is fun.
Terrain is fun. If you're going to paint a blood tornado, do all the kind of highlights and lowlights as red and orange, and don't kind of layer it over any other colours because it's very transparent. And if you use whites, it'll just be pink. Yeah. So paint it like you'd paint fire, I would say, and then put blood over it, and then it will have all the kind of highlights and lowlights that you want.
Interestingly, I've also done like 3 different kinds of highlighting red this month. And red is a surprisingly hard colour.
Weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's weird. It's like I struggle with purple as well. Because purple goes up to grey, and if you just mix purple with white, it can look pink if the highlight's too strong. Like your eye looks at it and he thinks it looks like pink. Whereas weirdly, like the most success I've had with purples on my Veritant, where on the back of the cloak it goes from an orange to purple as though it's like a sunrise with stars on it. Then on the front of the cloak I use the same like orange to edge highlight. You don't edge highlight purple with orange, but it just works. It's really strange. It's almost like the contrast deepens the purple around it. Yeah. Some colours are just quite weird. I agree. Red is a weirdly hard one to use.
So yeah, like because there's red in 3 different instances of my Harlequin. One is as a basis for red, but it's like red cloth, and I wanted it to look like velvet, so the highlight isn't extreme. It's very soft highlight on red. And then there's red leather, which highlights up to pink because, or like red PVC almost, where it's like very matte, except where it's not, and then it's very bright because it's a shiny material. Yeah. And then it's red as a basis for orange, so it goes up to orange quite sharply, but it kind of still has a dark red base that you don't even think of because you think it's orange. But it's doing a purple into orange gradient, goes through red, kind of, rather than through pink or blue, sort of goes. And then the interesting one was those 2 glass swords. I wanted to do both of them with contrasting colours that are shared with the other model. Like the amount of thinking I've had to do about how the colours relate to each other, so that all of them, that they look different, but they look like they're part of the same unit, but not because they all share a spot color or anything like that. Yeah. Like, it's nuts stuff, but like, so the miniature that has predominantly red and blue coloring in its work, its sword is the contrasting like lights inside its glass sword are purple and green because they're completely different to the colors on the model. But the other model has green and purple in its base colors because that's one of the gradients. But it has red and blue in its sword. So they kind of trade colours across the 2 models. This is maybe completely overthinking everything, but it's kind of what I've been up to. And trying to figure out, because I wanted like that really pretty fashionable at the moment, like hard red and blue neon lights inside the sword. And then I realised that you actually I found it looked best if I don't highlight the red up to pink, but highlight it straight from red to white. Right. Weirdly. So it's almost like red, slightly lighter red, white, and then you get that kind of neon red kind of thing where you almost need the suggestion of red under white and it looks red. Like, it's kind of an interesting process.
Yeah, it's really strange, and I think it's definitely been interesting seeing how highlights affect the colour that they're highlighting and can completely change the colour that you're highlighting. So if you overdo the purple and orange highlighted thing, I was painting some Aether wings, just pretty experimenting with colours really, and I painted like the outer wings as purple, and it's quite a deep purple. Then edge highlighted it with orange just for an experiment, and it looks burgundy. Yeah, it changes the whole look to burgundy just straight away. Just those 2 colours together, almost your mind mixes it into this new colour, which is insane. Yeah, I need to read a book about colour theory to understand what really happens when you're looking at colours and how your brain really processes it. And that gets applied to miniatures again in a completely different way. Because are you trying to create a sense that it is just a very tiny version of a much larger thing? Like, do you do lighting in that way, or do you just kind of I don't know. There's so many different approaches to it. It's insane.
That's going to come up in our question section, I think. Right, that exact idea. What we should do quickly, I think maybe we'll have a little bit less substantial battle report this month.
Yeah, it's a few quick games,
but it's worth talking about, which is the other thing that's come out recently, which is Age of Sigmar Skirmish. We've had a couple of questions in the past, including, I think, recently, about playing Age of Sigmar with a smaller number of models. And that is what they have released this weekend, is a very small booklet for £6, which is sort of a rules supplement called Skirmish, which provides sort of basically alternative army construction and a few new rules for playing battles with extremely small forces where each individual model moves independently. So like a kind of Necromunda or Mordheim style warband, along with 6 new scenarios and a kind of campaign to thread them together, and sort of advancement mechanics so that you gain XP essentially in, or renown as it's called, in each individual scenario that you then reinvest in your warband. And so it's not as substantial as something like Shadow War, but it is quite a big step from where AOS was in terms of supporting this stuff. Yeah. I know that there were fan-made things that did some of this work already. The other flip side to it is it's set in Shadespire, which is the city in the Realm of Death that's also the setting for Shadespire, which is the new sort of standalone small miniatures count kind of competitive focused tactics game coming out in the future at some point. So that's the top level view. So the way we approached it is we just threw together warbands today following the campaign rules to the letter, and played the first 2 missions of a 6-mission campaign. And it's really interesting, actually. Like, quite a lot to take away from it. I think one thing that stood out to us both is the initial points cost limitation for a campaign. So the idea is you play to a 50 points if you're building a warband for like a one-off game. But for a campaign, you begin at 25, and that's really incredibly limiting because there are 2 rules that really lock you in. One is that you need to have a hero to be your leader, and the other is that you need to have a minimum of 3 models. And so we both thought, like, this is broken, this doesn't work at all, because essentially the points cost for a given model in Skirmish is they have their own points values, but the way they're calculated is pretty much whatever the points cost is for the unit in AOS, divided by the minimum number of models in that unit to get the per model value, and then divided by 5. So a Stormcast Liberator is 4 points, like a Zangor is 4 points, a Kyric Acolyte is 3 points, a Blue Horror is 1 point, because when you divide it that many times you get down really low.
Yeah.
But a hero is 1 model, so it's basically just the points value divided by 5. So it means that your average hero is between like 16 and 24 points, which means that to get a hero and at least 2 other models into 25 points, you have to take a cheap hero.
The cheapest hero.
The cheapest hero normally, yeah. So for example, like I really wanted to take kind of the equivalent of a Chaos Sorcerer Lord, but that's 24 points. So I actually can't do it because there's no way for me to spend that remaining 1 point on 2 more models to fit into the warband. So my starter warband, which felt very small, was a Gaunt Summoner at 20 points, a Zangor at 4 points, and 1 Blue Horror at 1 point. Whereas you started with the Relictor.
Lord Relictor and 2 Liberators, who are the baseline hammer troops for Stormcast.
So like 16 points, 4 points, and 4 points.
Yeah.
And like, so it's hyper restrictive, but actually now having played 2 scenarios and leveled up between that scenario and added stuff, it feels right, actually.
Yeah, it's good. I think those higher points values for heroes exist for like match play. If you want to just sit down and say, let's play 100 points Skirmish, then you could have a Veritant or something more expensive be your leader.
So shall we talk through what happened to us first, or we should talk through the rules in abstract first?
Yeah.
What do you reckon? Because I think what happened to us was also us kind of figuring out things that would and wouldn't work for us as well. Because we wanted to follow the rules pretty closely, but at the same time...
Yeah, you want to see how it works. And there might be some things you might want to house rule, I think, particularly around mortal wounds and banning certain characters.
So yeah, because like the first scenario is supposed to represent the 2... Because we are sort of treating this as part of the ongoing story of our AOS and our AOS armies. So like this is my Gaunt Summoner investigating this kind of mysterious ruin in the realm of death, Shadespire, looking for something, Zinch stuff. And your Relictor is there, and it's kind of appropriate that a Lord Relictor is there because they have a connection to the realm of death, you know, as a kind of small splinter of the rest of your Stormcast army is fighting probably the rest of my army somewhere in a different realm.
Yeah.
Over books or whatever. There's this other skirmish happening. And that first battle is supposed to represent the moment the 2 sort of warbands find each other. And so the deployment is kind of randomized into which quadrant of the board you find yourself in this kind of like cluttered ruin. We used your new terrain and kind of created a little cluttered ruin.
It's a night fight, isn't it? And your troops become slightly dispersed by travelling together in this pitch darkness.
Yeah, and they get separated and different troops appear in different parts of the board. And also like the range of spells, this didn't really affect us much, but the range of spells and ranged attacks is limited to 12 inches on the first turn, 18 inches on the second round, and then lifted after that, which is representing the sun rising.
Yeah. So
like it's dark and then it gets to light, and that's what affects your ranges. And that first game, even with the small number of units, was actually pretty interesting and super close.
Yeah, it was.
Like we started with one of your Liberators kind of bumping into my Gaunt Summoner and Horror and just getting annihilated by Arcane Bolts, and the ability to throw out D3 mortal wounds into a 2 wound miniature. He was just gone, like first round.
Like, incinerated.
But then my Zangor happened to show up next to your Relictor and charge him and die in combat. No, he got electrocuted to death, I think.
Yeah, I think there was a round of combat, and then the Relictor waved the giant corpse he carries on a stick, and then lightning hit the Zangor and turned him to dust.
Indeed. And then there was this sort of cagey kind of dance around the middle of the board between my surviving Gaunt Summoner and one blue horror and your Liberator and Relictor as they sort of advanced on the ruin in the center of the board. And I kept my distance and used the blue horror to screen the Gaunt Summoner. And it came down to a combat, which is pretty tense. And I managed to kill the Liberator, but then lose the horror. And then it came down to essentially just a fight between the Gaunt Summoner and the Relictor in melee combat, which has a sort of cool thematic potential. It did feel a little bit like it came down to dice slightly because the Gaunt Summoner's melee weapon, if it hits and wounds and I roll, and then I can beat your bravery on 2 dice, you die immediately.
Yeah, it's 10 plus on 2 dice.
Yeah.
Would have been tough.
It would have been tough. But I didn't even get through your armor, like, ever. So I think I was going to lose in melee combat. But then
it's only one attack as well, that's the thing. Yeah.
So you won the first one with the major victory.
Yeah.
And we went on to, spend our stuff and boost up our warband. And we both made, completely opposite decisions.
Yeah.
Because I added a Zangor, because they're good, and they had multiple wounds. But then spent the rest of the points that I got. Because we both get points. You got more points than I did because of the fact that you won. And then I spent the rest on blue horrors just to kind of bulk it up, have more figures on the board.
Yeah.
And you did the opposite thing.
Yeah, so I had 12 renown points spare, and I decided to spend all of them on one of my new Vanguard Raptors long strikes, the snipers I referred to earlier that I've been painting up this month, just because I wanted to use the shiny new model I had. But also it's got a very good shooting attack. Only 1 shot a turn, so there's that chance to miss, but it hits on 2+, wounds on.
It's a 36-inch range as well.
I think it's 30 inches if he stands still. It's 24 if he moves, but then he can move, 5, so that's a weird rule. So it's Ren 2, damage 2, so it's gonna one-shot pretty much anything, any normal thing Chris has on the board. The general obviously will survive. But yeah, it's basically a sniper, this enormous gold armored sniper with a bird who talks to him and tells him where the guys are to kill.
Spotted bird.
His
big blue spotted bird.
Yeah, great model.
Yeah, it's a great model.
So I've, so I had warband size of 4. So I had 2 Liberators, Relictor, and a sniper. And then your warband was 7 or 8?
6.
I
also got a Carrick Acolyte as well. So I had a Gaunt Summoner, 2 Zangor, Carrick Acolyte, and 3 blue horrors.
Yeah. And then we looked at the second scenario, and it was here are 5 objectives. You need models near them to try and activate them, to find treasure in them.
Yeah.
And it kind of implied that you wanted to be exploring a lot of them because only on a 6 would you discover the treasure and it would become an objective. I only had 4 models.
Yeah.
So I thought,
it was super interesting.
I was what?
That scenario is actually really cool.
That scenario is great. Yeah.
So it's supposed to submit the 2 warbands having now encountered each other. They're now, competing to find the treasure in the ruins, searching for treasure. And so the way it works is there are functionally 5 objectives, which are 1 in the center and then 4 more at compass points around it on the board. If you have a model within 3 inches of one of those objectives at the end of your movement phase, you roll a dice, and on a 6, you find a relic there. And all that does is activate that, search area as an objective.
Yeah.
And all that matters is whoever controls the most objectives at the end of 5 rounds. So there's no, you don't score them between rounds. You're not getting points as you go.
Yeah.
And you don't even get the relics that you find. It's a bit like the 4 places of power, match play scenario for AOS proper, where it's all about splitting your forces between multiple control points. But the control points don't appear except on a roll of a 6, so you don't know which ones are going to be control points, which is a huge deal.
Really interesting, yeah.
And so, and then it creates this strategic decision between trying to move forces up to capture the things you know are control points, and we'll get on to how this played out, versus going to the unoccupied spaces to try and create a control point, but only on a 1 in 6 chance.
Right.
And you only got, there's 5 rounds, and so therefore you're going to have 5 movement phases, therefore there is for a given faction, you only got 5 chances of making a 1 in 6.
Yeah.
So.
But then it's really interesting because, the central objectives, the 3 kind of that cuts the board in half centrally, they're going to be kind of pinged more because both forces will have greater access to those. Yeah. So it's almost like they're more likely to become the objective points. But if you camp back with, say, a sniper and just keep trying to score a rear objective, then that's a valid thing to do because if it comes off, suddenly the enemy's out of position. Yeah. It's really, really great.
So the way that game started is I I had a plan, which was I was going to split, because I had more people to ping things.
Yeah.
And then depending on where the first objective spawned, I was going to then sort of like consolidate around that, because control of an objective is determined by the amount of bodies nearby.
Yes.
So suddenly all of those cheap blue horrors have a big role to play. And like, right at the beginning of the game, it was quite cagey. Like, neither of the side objectives that I was closest to came off straight away, and neither did yours. And as on that first turn, you brought up your crossbow, I could see what you were aiming for, which was literally the game's Gaunt Summoner. So he moved back behind a wall.
Very sensible.
Yeah.
Summoner.
So you couldn't see him, just because I knew I had to kind of keep my big guns in reserve.
There's a really cagey start to the fight over the first few rounds where nothing had been activated and we were just sort of positioning and getting angles on each other. Really cool kind of maneuvering in a war game.
Yeah. Maybe more tactical than we've had in AOS previously, actually.
Yeah. So then after that, I can't remember which one got activated first. So you ran...
Yeah, so I made this decision, like, at the same time that I ran the Gaunt Summoner behind a wall. I made a play for the middle, and I still don't know if it was the right decision. I thought maybe I would try and, because I thought because I had a numbers advantage, I might try and force a fight, because if I can wipe you out, I just win. So, like, I decided to do a run with my Carrick Acolyte, and I was thinking about running in behind cover. I got a good run as well. I rolled like a 5, so he can run 11 inches.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, I'm going to put him in the middle. And then I rolled for at that point I controlled 3 objectives. So, and both of the side ones didn't come off, but then the middle one did. And that changed the complete fabric of the game, because suddenly the biggest objective, which is in the middle of the board, is like a live objective, and we can all fight over it. And so I knew you'd have to make a beeline there. And actually at that time, that really fitted my plan, because I thought, well, this will force the fight.
Yeah.
Like, you will have to come to the middle. I have units on either side of it. And so I can just get there quickly, right? We've got 2 turns of shooting. I should be able to kill a Liberator every turn for the Gaunt Summoner at least. Like, I felt like I might well have it at that point. Then it was super interesting, like, how it panned out from there.
Yeah, so I moved up, once that happened, I moved my forces forwards and stopped trying to cap the rear point. But I kept one guy on the side point close to me, so I was kind of contesting 2. You have to be within 3 inches to roll that dice and try and get a 6 and activate it as an objective. So the Rector moved forward so that his 12-inch lightning blast move was going to hit stuff on the other side of the objective, the building basically. Then I moved the long strike sideways closer to a different objective so that he could potentially score it, but also giving him really good sight lines across the battlefield. And what was really cool about the way he worked was that it changed the way Chris played so much, which is how snipers work. Like if someone's got a sniper lines on a street or something, like, people don't go there. Like, it's area control just simply through threat. It's really cool to see how well that worked and how much you had to think about it as a threat. Because I could one-shot any sub-hero character on the board. Yeah.
In hindsight, I should have sent the Gaunt Summoner just after him in a straight line. I just chased him.
Good, because he's only got 1 shot, and he's 2+ to hit and does 2 damage. There's every chance that Gaunt Summoner would close enough to get his Arcane Bolt off and finish him perhaps. But it's all theoretical, it's hard to tell, because I did like a couple of libs screening him, and the libs did drop a little bit eventually, but you'd have had to go through them in an early stage of the fight. But anyway, I was moving to basically semi-contest the center while also keeping an eye on the side thing. And the game swung in the moment where I rolled a 6 on that side objective.
Yeah, so suddenly that was a live objective as well.
Yes, and suddenly it was possible to score 2 points by being within 3 inches of both the central objective and that one.
Yeah, like, so the 2 Liberators, like, I knew there wasn't really point in going after the Relictor. It takes too long to kill.
Yeah.
I wanted to outnumber him on the middle, and then kill everything else. So I'd score the middle. You wouldn't have anyone on the side, and we're done. Yeah. Basically. What happened was, so there was, so early on, the long strike did snipe one of the Zangor.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was like, that will happen, right? Because it does 2 damage, so just dead. So, the sort of Gaunt Summoner shooting from the Carrick Acolyte managed to kill both Liberators.
Yep.
And then I'm trying to think of the exact ordering of events. So there were a few kind of crucial things. I moved all the blue horrors up to contest the middle with the Carrick Acolyte. The Carrick Acolyte got incinerated by the Relictor.
Yep.
In a big way.
Oh yeah.
The blue horrors couldn't really do anything other than be there. Like,
I think the biggest mistake you made in the game was charging the Relictor with the blue horrors. I think you win if you don't do that. Because if you move them round back where the Gaunt Summoner was and camped there and forced me to come onto you, and I could fail charges.
I didn't charge them. You charged them. They failed their charges.
Okay, so
yeah, I could have moved them back.
Exactly. You were well within my charge range, so you basically moved into combat.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
So if you'd have clustered around there wouldn't have been a huge amount I could have done about it. I don't think.
I think you would have got there because,
maybe
like,
so.
I think, like, even how many. So essentially, like, what happened? Partly because I wanted to. I think what I should have done is fed you them one at a time to screen you a bit.
Yeah, maybe just pin them down.
Yeah. Because I sort of took a chance on trying to get the wounds through, but that just didn't happen. There was a big. Well, I'll tell you, the one thing that I didn't expect to happen was the other Zangor, the one with the shield, got one shot because you got a 6 on the long.
Oh yeah, that's the other thing you can do. Yeah, if you roll 6 to hit, he does 2 mortal wounds straight off.
Yeah,
which is death to any. Yeah,
and that was a huge. I mean, actually, and the Zangors with shields even have a save against mortal wounds, but it's only on a 6.
Right.
So it just didn't come off, and that was a big deal because I wasn't expecting to lose him that quickly. Because I was keeping the Zangors in front because even though if the long strike goes through, I can keep putting more Mystic Shield on them and keep them up, and then losing him put me in a position where I needed to kill the long strike and then contest the center with the Gaunt Summoner. But unfortunately, my Arcane Bolt it was out of range for one thing, and then it got cancelled. Got dispelled. It was actually the only dispel you got off in 2 games.
Yes, it's true. My relatives took an artifact. You could choose artifacts for your heroes that give them certain abilities, and it gives them a dispel. And it was a vital one as well. The Arcane Bolt's really good in the game when you've got individual heroes, like D3 Mortal Wounds is very, very good. So I was glad I had the opportunity to do that.
And then that game, and then again there was sort of a combat phase where if I hypothetically get the, no, we didn't even bother with the combat phase actually because it was basically over.
Because
the Relictor managed to kill all of the blue horrors in melee. At which point the blue horror and the Gaunt Summoner were both on that central objective, so they cancel each other out. No one controls it.
Yeah.
But that long strike was still on the
side objective,
which had activated.
Yeah.
Which means you won by 1 point to 0, but because it doesn't matter, the magnitude of the victory doesn't matter, it's still a major victory because you get 1 and I get none. So yeah, rough one. That was actually, it was really interesting because again, I thought my numbers advantage meant a lot, and actually I think you're right that having the blue horrors in a position to get meleeed one after another was the thing. However, I thought I was going to kill the long strike, basically.
Right.
And that's when that didn't happen. Because, I mean, the plan was to run the Zangor and the Gaunt Summoner. And I think just losing that Zangor in one shot really threw me.
Yeah, I mean, he killed 2 things in a 5-round game, which is about right for what he does.
Yeah,
so
true. I don't think there's anything imbalanced. Literally the only mistake we made is there's supposed to be there's a table that you consult based on the points differential, because obviously in a game where you get a random number of points based on whether you win or lose and some other factors, the amount that you're behind by, you get a certain number of rerolls.
Yeah.
And luckily, I don't think it would have made a difference in that game.
I don't think so.
But the reason that I thought about it, I realized we completely forgot to do it in the second game. We did it in the first game.
Yeah.
And it didn't help you.
No.
But because you were 1 point behind me and I was 3 points behind you in the second game. But there was one roll where the Gaunt Summoner, because his Arcane Bolt failed, hypothetically he can still kill the long strike with his ranged attack because it does D3 damage.
Right.
And I rolled a 2 on the 3 up to hit, and that was when I realized I should have a reroll and I don't have it. So I didn't use it because we'd forgotten to do it at the beginning of the game. But that was one of those things where it's like, that was a minor thing, but like,
yeah,
I don't think it would have made a difference.
There's still to wound, you still got 4+ save.
I think fundamentally I still lost it because of a bad call on range, basically with the Gaunt Summoner. Like, I don't think I should have hidden him when we were moving your crossbowman into position. I should have.
He's very resilient. 6 wounds, isn't he?
5.
Oh, not that resilient. What's his save?
6.
So he doesn't have 1 against long strikes.
No.
Well, I think you're right to hide him.
No, I should have just run him at you because I should have just run him at you because like you have a couple of targets there. I should have made you have to pick between them because as it was, like I thought I'd give you one Zangor that you could still see and move the others up behind cover, and Mystic Shield the only one you could see, so I could try and control the damage output.
Yeah.
But the damage output is so high that it's still I still have the 6 up save, and you know, and then it didn't work. And I thought, oh, the shield one will last a bit longer. And I guess it was a swingy thing that I couldn't anticipate that they were going to suddenly become mortal wounds.
Yeah.
But still, I should have just thrown everything at you, I think, rather than be coy about it.
It's interesting. It's a tough fight for you in a straight fight. That's the trouble. I think the Stormcast are just very good at skirmish because they're so resilient. Having those 2 wounds each is a huge deal. Those Zangle do as well.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you this, like, I've seen what I can afford with the points I did get from that game.
Yeah.
And I now know I will build around what you've got, which is really nice. Like,
that's how it should
those
work,
games are so short. Like, we played 2 of them, but you probably play all 6 of them in a afternoon.
Yeah, I think you should get through them in an afternoon quite easily.
And that's a really exciting thing because actually I really like the idea of like, I know what I'm going to add to that warband now and it will help a lot. And that's in direct response to what you've spent most recently. And so that's almost like an interesting, I really like the idea of that interplay. And like you said earlier, it's a cool way to potentially trial out new armies if you don't want to commit to loads of models. Like I might do that as my corn outlet as well.
Yeah. You concept up a skirmish band and it will work really well. I love that, that second scenario, I think you could play it endlessly and it would produce interesting tactical decisions. I think it's one of the best scenarios I've played in AOS full stop.
Same, I agree with that,
Yeah, really, really good stuff. So I'm really excited to see what the more advanced ones are. I think there are 6, aren't there?
Yeah. So yeah, we
should play through sequentially.
And even though like I've lost 2 in a row and therefore you've got more points twice in a row, I don't really feel like I'm out yet. Like
no,
I think scenarios might favour me in a way, but also like, I can get different units in there and the weight of numbers will add up and that's a meaningful thing as well.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. Can't wait to finish that campaign.
I do think, I do have one thing I want to talk about. So yeah, now that we're talking about how the game panned out, I'd like to kind of discuss quickly, like, they have made some interesting decisions about what doesn't exist in that mode. So there are points values for the different Grand Alliances and because of the strict points restriction, obviously you're limited in what you can take anyway, but also some units just haven't been given point values outright.
Right.
Presumably because they'd be too overpowered. The one I was disappointed about is I kind of wanted to take the Ogre Thaumaturge as my general, hypothetically when we were thinking about it, because we've established now that him and the Relic have a long running rivalry.
Yep.
However, he's completely banned. And I think the reason for that is probably twofold. One is he does mortal wounds when he charges, which could probably be completely broken in a game where you're charging individual units, individual models, not units. But the other side of it is he regenerates wounds every turn, which I think could also be a huge deal. So I get, maybe he's too good. I was a bit weirded up. The Chaos Sorcerer Lord is also gone. He has like a buff aura that might be seen as too powerful. So I was actually quite limited in my hero choice. It's literally just the Gaunt Summoner, like, because everything else I had was banned.
I wonder if their logic wasn't, like these things are too hard. It's more that I think the things in there are limited stuff you could buy in plastic in a shop.
The Ogre Thaumaturge is in a booster pack by himself, so is the Gaunt Summoner.
I thought they were in
so is the Chaos Sorcerer Lord, so is shitloads of the stuff is banned. All the resin models are banned. That's just reflectable anyway. But
so that is okay.
But no, like all of them, like the Thaumaturge is in a booster pack. Pack. Yeah.
Oh, when did they bring those out? I thought they were all Silver Tower exclusive.
No, they all came out with the Tzeentch Arcanites wave.
Oh, right. I missed that. Fair enough.
Yeah.
That's a few months ago. Good.
The one that I think we both realized, like, holy shit, don't do this, because it seems anti-fight, and I'm genuinely amazed that it's in the game, is the Heralder. Yes,
this is the Stormcast Horn Blast unit, and he just targets a piece of scenery within 5 inches, and you can move and shoot and do this. And you roll a dice, and anything within that dice roll inches wise that takes a hit suffers D3 mortal wounds. So it's guaranteed 1 damage to anything within D6 inches of a terrain piece. And on a 4x4 board with a large piece of terrain in the middle, that's going to be a lot of the board. And a lot of the things in the game have 1 wound. So it's just insta-kills. Yeah. Like so much stuff in the game.
So like suddenly, like, I mean, I've always thought that was a little bit strong in the game anyway. And I say that as an army with a lot of 1 wound
I think
models.
It's fine in the game. I think it's because, I think it's fine in the game. Yeah.
I think
it's strong, but
I guess I think I'm in a position to not enjoy it, and the reason for that is because, one, you don't have to roll dice to see if it happens, and like almost every other spell in the game is at least some chance that it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Whereas it is point at a piece of terrain, that piece of terrain honks so loudly people die.
Yes.
But I think the other thing is that, like, I know, as we were talking about at the beginning of this episode, shooting is upcosted quite a lot in AOS. And that leaves a lot of Tzeentch units in a weird position. I'll be interested to see what gets rebalanced in the next General's Handbook, where they're upcosted quite a lot because they have shooting, but they're fucking rubbish. Because they're a horde unit. So like Pink Horus, for example, or like they're upcosted for kind of interesting reasons, which is like pink horrors are wizards and can shoot, but
Yeah,
they're
I
also...
think they're well costed. They do all sorts of things. They're
but they're
really
still,
flexible.
but they're super versatile, but they're still like 1 wound models, where if you think about sort of units, like, obviously they'd be insane if they had more than 1 wound, but it means that I think, and this is not to say that the Herald is overpowered, so much as it's a real problem for me, because I tend to have like a lot of things that can't always just avoid being near a wall or a hill or something like that.
Yeah.
And it means a lot to lose them. Whereas if your big unit of Liberators or whatever takes a bunch of wounds from a Heraldor blast, they're probably not going to all die. Whereas literally for me, it's the potential of losing like an entire 140 point unit from a thing that can't fail.
They can only kill 3 things a turn. And
What? How can it?
It's D3 on a unit.
I thought it was D3 per model.
No.
Oh shit. That's why I thought it was so broken.
Yeah, no, it's never been.
Oh shit. Okay. Yeah.
It's good against heroes, obviously, for that reason. So you're
Yeah. Okay. No, that is fine then. Sorry. I always thought, I thought it was within that many inches.
But
every model
that's
took.
the thing, in skirmish it is, because every model counts as
Yes,
a unit.
okay,
which
yeah.
is why it's completely broken.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm completely with you now.
Yeah,
actually.
yeah,
I thought it was D3 per model within
No,
that
no,
range.
no,
Because that was the thing I thought was insane, was that like turns every potential terrain piece into a nuclear
It's
bomb.
very good against stuff like the Gaunt Summoner on a Vortex. You just blast it. But, so it's good against heroes and stuff like that. And if you're fighting a Heraldor on the board, you have to think about where your heroes are in relation to, scenery,
Walls,
terrain,
pieces of terrain, hills.
puddles, anything that really counts as scenery. But I don't think it's too overpowered. There's
No,
stuff
actually,
that
no,
does-
I'll take it back.
Yeah.
There he is.
He's back.
Oh god.
He's going to kill us all.
I'm sorry. Yeah, no, I totally take that back, actually. I genuinely thought, like...
In skirmish, it's fucked though.
yeah, it's
Undoubtedly.
that's why I'm amazed that he's pointed up.
Yeah, I think maybe it's the whole thing where, players have a conversation with each other, and if you think something else on the other side is just going to break the whole experience, you just agree not to ever take it. I'm never going to take Heraldor. It's just going to ruin the whole campaign.
Yeah.
Other stuff most of it seems fine though. I was worried about Mortal Wounds before we started playing, but the fact it's such a quick, high lethality, game, it's fine actually. I think it's fine.
It's like, I mean, also they don't always come off against A, because the spells, and B, because like you sometimes get a 1 on that Mortal Wounds thing, and it's great when something has 1 health, but like if it doesn't, then like
They can still kill things just as well.
Yeah.
On half health.
Yeah. No, I am. You're completely right. Like I'm wrong, because I just didn't misunderstood how the Heraldor worked. Because my experience of him has been he honks and everything dies.
Yeah, it's normally. I use it to kill your heroes a lot. And
Yeah.
it's that auto 1 damage is really good. It is really good. I just don't think it's overpowered necessarily.
No, I think there's a psychological thing, and this doesn't make it overpowered, about having any ability that doesn't have a chance to fail.
Right.
In a game where almost all forms of mortal wounds come from a dice roll. I think even if the Heraldor thing was a 2-up, that would make it feel
Maybe
less.
so.
I think there's something about having your opponent. This is an AOS thing, not a skirmish thing. There's something about having your opponent just sort of say,
That's gone now.
and this is gone now.
Yeah.
That is like a negative play experience. Not in a huge way, not in a kind of like, and we're in the game forever kind of way. Just it's a design point. It's one of the reasons rolling dice can be exciting, is because like, I'm going to attempt this. Let's see if it happens.
Yeah.
Versus, and now you have activated my trap card, which in this case was standing within
Near a thing.
within 6 inches of a thing. Like,
Yeah. Rob Symes, who does Warhammer TV, he is doing a doubles tournament that's coming up, and he's been saying on stream that he's building a doubles army that has 6 Heraldors in it, just to see if he could break it, just
Yeah.
to see if you really can.
And I think it's at that point that the lack of a dice roll actually matters, because suddenly, if there was a dice roll, even if it was a 2-up, only 5 of those 6 Heraldors on average is going to blow up a terrain piece.
Yeah, and again, they're a hard counter to Sylvaneth, who their whole thing is putting down enormous woods that they have to stand in to get all their bonuses, and then just a Heraldor turns up. And,
I think it's a combination of no chance to fail and a fundamentally silly mental image.
Yeah, it is very silly actually. It's almost as silly as the Lord Celestin on foot for the Stormcast, who has a hammer cape, and he swishes the cape and hammers fly out of it and kill things around him.
Maybe the Stormcast are silly.
They're very, very silly. I've embraced this.
Yeah. No, you are right though. I don't think it's busted in the base game, possibly unless you have 6 of them. But yeah,
We'll
think,
see. See how Rob Symes does at that tournament.
We'll see. I think it'd be really interesting if they had to remove the terrain piece, which would be fluffier.
That would be
because
cool.
the idea is
Yeah,
that they
yeah.
are blowing up the terrain piece, right? Like
And then they can't use it again, right?
Yeah, because
that's
actually,
quite
there's one of the new terrain rules in Skirmish is it's its version of deadly terrain. I think it's designed to be less potentially game changing than, because deadly terrain in regular AOS is if you move across a piece of terrain, you roll a dice on a 1, you die, whatever you are. Doesn't matter if you're Archaon, you're dead now. The way that works in Skirmish is it's called like collapsing or something. And so if you roll a 1 when only running or charging, so you can move across something as long as you're careful. If you run or charge across it, you roll a dice, and on a 1, the running and charging unit dies, and the terrain piece is removed because it's collapsed.
Yeah.
Which actually I think...
That'd be a good solution.
I think that'd be a good solution to herald it, because it means that, it almost means that every piece of terrain is potentially ammo.
Yeah, it's really interesting. You could use them to remove cover. Like if people are hiding from your shooters, you can honk at a thing to remove it. It's interesting utility there.
And then rather than, because I think that's the thing where it's like, we've definitely had games where you've like honked at the same hill twice because I haven't been able to get far enough away from it.
As many times as possible.
Yeah.
I mean.
And that's, you know, potentially numbers balanced, but in terms of the mental image of what he's doing, it's like...
Oh, that building exploded again.
Yeah, exactly. It's like just...
Damn.
The explosion exploded.
Yeah.
Like...
He's an interesting character. Obviously I would like him.
I'm extremely fond of him in principle.
I love the model for him as well. It's so silly.
He's also, his spectacular appearance in our Silver Tower campaign was the other one.
Yeah, he got vomited out of a gargoyle.
Yeah.
And joined our party for a bit. He was useless.
He was...
There's no terrain to blast if you're inside the terrain.
No, indeed. Yeah, man, that's deep.
I know. As deep as they get.
You can't honk at the building you're in.
Well, it's unwise to do.
Yeah.
To do so.
That was Skirmish. We had fun with it. We need to play some more of it.
Yeah, it's good. I'm looking forward to playing more of it. With lots of different warbands. I'm going to build a Sylvaneth, Death Sylvaneth.
Yeah, and I'm going to do corn stuff, I think.
Excellent.
And I'm going to run away from buildings. I'm going to run at you, basically. No more magic
Around
shit.
buildings.
Just running at things.
That's the corn way.
Yeah.
Look out for the blood tornadoes.
What we should do before we wrap up is some questions. Before we finish up this lengthy pod.
Yeah, lots to talk about.
Our first question comes from, already mentioned in this episode, friend Rich McCormick. Hi, Rich.
Hello, Rich.
He's in Japan now. Paints lovely Dark Angels.
Excellent tanks.
Excellent tanks. Rich writes, "Hi, drop podcasters." So he did there. That's the PC Gamer pun spirit, alive and well. Am I the first person to make the drop pod joke? Please inform your listeners if so. Rich is also extremely competitive and likes to yield the glory for anything.
Rich has beaten all of you to this pun, so
and let's not make Rich too smug about that, because he doesn't need the help. My question is, which is the worst Space Marine chapter? And why? I was thinking of the original 20, but bonus round for later years free-for-all bullshit too. I've oscillated wildly over the years, growing up hating the Blood Angels and then finding the Space Wolves too cheesy before settling on boring Ultramarines. But even I kind of like them now, podcast voice.
I got to the same place with them, actually.
Best, obviously, are the stupid, sexy Emperor's Children.
Oh, I love them.
Or the Dark Angels. Or the OG Grumpy Iron Warriors. Or the Love Rich. So I'm going to say, like, my initial bid for this, and I appreciate there's going to be, like, no right answer, because... is I actually really don't like the Iron Warriors.
Oh yeah.
No, hang on, not Iron Warriors. I really don't like the Iron Hands. And the reason is, for the exact thing that just happened. A, it's too much like Iron Warriors.
Yes.
Can you, off the top of your head, remember what the difference between them is?
No idea.
Right?
Yeah.
That's problem one. Iron Warriors are like the kind of engineering, hazard stripesy Chaos Space Mutation now, right? Iron Hands, genuine fucknose, right?
Yeah.
I know it's the obvious answer is to pick one of the 20 that no one ever thinks about, but the bigger problem with them is their Primarch. Because we had the conversation yesterday, but it reminds me how much this annoys me, right? There's a lot of dumb fucking names in Warhammer, right? And particularly among the Primarchs, right? You know, everyone likes Dark Angels, but I won't buy for a second that their Primarch is called the Lion. His name is Lionel. And they can say it's Lion, like apostrophe L Johnson. But his name is Lionel Johnson.
That is his name.
His name is Lionel Johnson.
Respect it.
A bit like the Ultramarines Primarch is called Robert Gilliman. There's and there's a lot of on the nose naming, Sanguinius for the Blood Angels, but they're kind of themed around that, right? And then there's, you made the point yesterday that Angron for the angriest Primarch. It's dumb.
Yeah. He's cool though, actually.
The Primarch of the Iron Hands is, and I fucking hate this, Ferrus Manus. Which is a lot of these decisions were made in the 80s that we subsequently regret, right? But none of the other Primarchs have the same name as their chapter, but in pretend Latin. Like, the Primarch of the Ultramarines is not Ultras Marinus. The Primarch of the Blood Angels is literally Sanguinius, but it could be more on the nose than it is, right? Like, Ferrus Manus, Iron hand. It's terrible.
Mr. Metal Hand.
Yeah. Like, if Lehman Russ was called Astra Loopy, that would be as dumb.
Lemon Russ is quite bad as well.
Lemon Russ, yeah. Yeah. Yes, it is. I mean, I don't know. At least it's a name. Like, you know.
I would pick Space Wolves. I think they're terrible. I think they're kind of weird. One with nature, I've tamed a 20-foot tall wolf thing is really weird and kind of out of fiction. Like, Space Marines embody a lot of different kind of spirits and approaches to war. But Here's a Wolf I found is not like an amazingly... there are other factions.
The implication that they're not actually wolves, they're hyper-mutated space wolves.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super dumb. A lot of them, it's just super, super dumb. And there are other factions that do the bloodlust thing better than the Space Wolves, who have cooler armor with better colours. It's like, I had to paint up some Space Wolves. 30k Space Wolves, admittedly, but fucking tedious, really. Like, doing the battle damage and stuff on them was good, but I really couldn't engage with their slightly ridiculous fantasy, even though the Burning of Prospero is a really interesting scenario, and the Space Wolves are a perfect fit for it. It's the best thing that's ever happened to the Space Wolves, that story. Like, anything else they've been involved with has never been that inspiring.
They need a more exciting chapter, The Thousand Suns, to make them interesting.
Yes.
I mean, I suppose, actually, like, because they're so beloved, but, like, so they are Viking werewolves. That's the whole deal with Space Wolves, right?
Yeah.
They're Viking werewolves.
They've grown up on this incredibly cold planet, where almost no one survives. They're almost kind of their spirits are honed by this incredibly harsh environment, and they're hardened spirits. That are boring.
But like, guess who else is super hard and from an ice planet? Rogel Dawn.
Yeah.
Who is you know what his people are called? This is another bit of dumb naming. They grow up it's an ice-based community from Inuit.
What?
Yeah.
Oh, well, there you go.
He's a space Eskimo.
Yeah, space Eskimo. So you see that? I could buy into that.
Yeah, and there's a lot of dumb things, and there's maybe a certain point where you go like, is this silly? Is this silly? But like,
it is, yeah.
I mean, I think the Blood Angels also suffer for a similar reason, because they're vampires for some reason.
Yeah.
And there's like there's a level of, does it need an extra level of genre fiction on top of the genre fiction it already is? And that's my problem with Space Wolves, I think, as well, is like, do they need to be werewolves? Like, because they can call it the Canis Helix and the Wolfen, but what you're talking about is lycanthropy and werewolves.
Yeah, the way that the Blood Angels thing expresses itself on the tabletop is that instead of cool-looking red guys in armor, you have guys in cool-looking black armor who are going to die of this terrible bloodthirst by the end of the battle. Like, there's a cool sense of drama to that this is their last battle no matter what happens. They get executed after this because the bloodthirst has taken them, and that's it. When you look at a Blood Angel force, you're like, there's a story there that's happened. Those units are already fated to die. That's cool. When you look at a Space Wolves army, it's like, there's a big wolf that just looks completely out of place on the tabletop. And there's a man with loads of hair because he's almost like a semi-wolf, and that looks really, really strange in the Space Marine armor, and just doesn't really work. And
and it's the worst excesses of like Games Workshop adjective stuff,
right?
Like, wolfishly on the wolf,
right?
Like, everything is a wolf thing, right? I mean, Stormcast have that problem a little bit with storm things and lightning things and thunder things, but like, yeah, they really suffer for it. So maybe I'm with you on Space Wolves, actually.
Yeah, it's because they're so prominent and obviously quite popular.
Still a Ferrus Manus.
I mean, that is obviously some sort of crime.
Yeah. It's interesting, like, because it is this beautiful fiction built out of individually, possibly staggeringly dumb parts. And I say that with love. Like, yes, genuinely, like, love this setting. Like, you can read the Horus Heresy books and never question for a second, why the fuck is Horus called Horus?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you totally accept it when you read it. And it, like, the fiction is great, I love it. But not necessarily for the Space Wolves.
No. Next question comes from Ross, who writes, a miniature howdy. Firstly, I wanted to throw a shout out to Wowbagger from Discord on the pod, who was kind enough to send me some old Skaven models to help me get back into the hobby. That is just pushing, really, I think. I mean, it's a lovely thing to do, but at the same time, it's like, bringing someone else into the fold. Painting has been a blast when I've had time to do it. And so thanks to him for the models, and you two for stoking the fires of Warhammer deep within my soul. We too are culpable.
The fires of Warhammer. It must be corn.
Must be literally on fire. While I'm here, I should probably ask a question. I fondly remember playing Mordheim as a teenager with the persistent elements such as named characters, injuries, and loot being a particular draw. I know you often talk of the narrative threads of your games in AOS, but would you like to see some mechanics to allow persistence between games? I know most people are likely to end up playing the same people multiple times, which in effect forms small campaigns. Perhaps a unit that ended a game routed as a negative modifier in the next game when it attempts a morale check, for example. Can you think of any other effects you'd like to carry over between games? Thanks for answering, everybody. Taymeister. So I actually, obviously Skirmish has this to some extent in that you gain power, but death and injuries and things don't matter.
That's right.
I thought it would be interesting because we haven't used it yet, but you and I did brainstorm a persistence for heroes and mounts idea that I'd still like to kind of
there's some good stuff there. Yeah, I mean you can house rule this stuff. Like if a Dracoth has lost its rider before, it might have a certain animosity towards certain. You might just charge at things outside of its general's control, like almost like scatter dice.
Yeah,
and obviously this stuff is mad, and you'd never do it in like a match play environment, but you can certainly put these things in. There are, Games Workshop have Path to Glory campaigns, which are sort of campaigns for armies where you chain together a series of battle plans and you change the unit makeup of the armies based on what's happened. It's nowhere near as involved and there aren't kind of wounding mechanics. And for me, wounding mechanics are really, really characterful. And some of Mordheim's best stuff is the fact that your guy's lost a leg, so it's now got a peg leg. And he's got -1 movement, and you can reflect that on the model as well. It's just that stuff's really characterful. And I'd like to see that, like, the kind of, the agony and scarring of these insane conflicts being reflected in what the units, how the units behave and what they can do.
I think the idea we had for, this is obviously a top level thing, but like the idea was to have a sort of like almost like a buyback system for heroes that die in combat, including Stormcast who do get reforged.
Yeah.
Where, a system I'd like to see would be something like if a hero dies in a battle, you can have them back in 2 battles time with no penalty. If you want them back in the next battle, you have to roll on like a weaknesses table, functionally, which represents either the trauma of being reforged or the trauma of being pulled back out of the realm of chaos, whatever is appropriate to the particular character. But that with some interesting qualifications, like they lose that penalty mid-game, potentially, if they kill another hero, something like that.
Yeah.
And the reason we thought about that, the reason I was thinking about this, and when we were talking about this in the pub, was I lose all of our games, as we've established. And so I kind of wanted a reason to go like gunning for heroes towards the end of a game to try and weaken you for the next game, that kind of thing.
That's a good idea, yeah. Just give you an extra kind of...
Like, so sub-objective, like I'm going to lose. How do I cause enough damage that the next battle is easier?
Yeah, it's what happened when your Chaos Lord went up to my general and used all of your Zinch dice to kill him. And it was like, well, it feels like there could be some cool repercussions for that in future battles, given that we are on this campaign.
Like, yeah, I kind of want you to have like, well, at the time, this was before the Stormcast book came out and they established that the Dracoths also get reforged.
Yeah.
So we thought like, if he's died, he gets a new Dracoth, and like maybe his penalty is that he has a Dracoth, a shit Dracoth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like an unblooded Dracoth.
Yeah, unblooded is what we came up with, yeah. That he could be, I can't remember how we decided we might.
It was something like maybe a penalty to charge rolls or something like that.
Yeah.
So like he's actually a little bit like skittish and
might balk at the true war.
Like, or if you do a run, you have to roll 2 dice and take the lowest, something like that.
Yeah, it's something. And then once he's done it for that battle, he's over it, and he's kind of he's blooded. He's kind of
ready.
And he's battle experienced and is fine again. So that kind of stuff. You can just. I recommend people house rule it themselves. I think that's better, rather relying on GW to come up with all this stuff.
I think the way this is all going to shake down, and actually the thing we didn't talk about at all, but is that Horus Heresy is using 7th edition rules. So Horus Heresy is sticking with the previous version of Warhammer, which is interesting. I don't know too much about it. Like, I'm super into that stuff from a lore and painting and hobby point of view. I don't know if I'll ever play. I just love the stuff. But like, it feels like AOS is shaking down as the mega customizable one where house ruling stuff makes sense. New 40k feels like it'll be somewhere in the middle, like a kind of balanced mixture of your own creativity, but pretty robust and wide-ranging rules. And then Horus Heresy will be the historical wargame where you respect the setting.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so therefore these house ruling, this stuff makes, if you want a house rule in progression, that makes sense in AOS, I think.
Yeah, it's very easy. It's only having so few rules means it's much easier to come up with just little rules modifications that don't have terrible knock-on effects.
Yeah. We should totally try and maybe write up those persistence rules though.
Yeah, we should playtest them, and then any that work we can put on the TGA forums or something.
Yeah. Next question comes from Duncan. It's more of a statement, but it's a good statement by someone who knows what he's talking about. Dear Minotaurs and Marines, when talking about his painting method for his Thousand Suns, Chris mentioned that part of what he was hoping to achieve with using metallics was that they would naturally create light and shadow on the mini. This technique's problem is that while it allows you to create highlights that are 100% perfect for a 2-inch tall model Terminator, if you look at the exact same cast and blew it up to the size of a real Terminator in the exact same lighting conditions and took a photograph, they would look quite different. The heart of a good miniature painting is tricking the eye. You could argue that one of the reasons non-metallics can actually, in some circumstances, look better than true metallics is that they allow the painter to mimic the way a material would behave at a larger scale. Textures in video games can be a great place to look for examples of how to create effects, because just as with miniatures, they can't rely on ambient lighting correctly interacting with materials, and so have to fake it. My current go-to inspiration is Heroes of the Storm, since its visuals hit just the right spot for miniatures because of its level of stylization, relatively simple lighting system, and camera viewing angles and distance. Which I think is a really good point. Like, he's completely right in that, like, you know, I think I said as an offhand comment that doing metallics on the body of all of my Marines does create some natural lighting effects. I would have agreed with him at the time that it's not a substitute for full highlighting. Yeah. But actually, it's interesting that with the Horus Heresy models, generally they tend to go for metallics, like actual metallics, even though that isn't realistic at scale, simply because I think they pay more attention to like the right materials, quote unquote. Whereas actually, if you look at the GW painted versions of the same models, they do GW style matte paints highlighted, which is interesting from a kind of stylistic point of view. Yeah. I just think it's a good point. Yeah,
it's a really good point. Really, really good. And is that next level of painting as well, like that you're looking at when you're looking at the Golden Demons, the stuff that those artists really bear in mind?
His question is about potentially doing meetups for this pod. I think he sent the question a little while ago, and pre-Warhammer Fest, obviously, we didn't do that. I think more broadly, like, I don't know, I speak for both of us, but like, I think, you know, Miniatures Month is still growing. I don't know if we're necessarily at the point to do anything like that yet.
Yeah, we've got no idea how many people listen is the trouble. So it's like, we could go to a pub, no idea how many people would.
It is far more likely that we would do something for the Crate and Crowbar broadly.
Yeah.
And do this monthly as like a part of that. Yeah, but then we would do something dedicated for this. But I mean, there's no, you know, if there's events coming up and we're there, then A, it's always fun to go to the pub, and B, people should just say hi anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Next question comes from Fienia from Discord, who writes, walloping howdy does D3 mortal wounds to the listener.
Ouch.
My question is, have you ever been interested to any degree in historical wargaming? As a younger man, I was only ever interested in fantastical settings, but my latest deep plunge into the world of wargaming has involved quite a lot of bolt action, one of the more popular historical wargames. I wonder if a wargamer is destined to become interested in historicals as he or she grows older, eventually ending up as a 65-year-old with an exact replica of the Battle of Waterloo in their basement. Thanks, Fienia/Pete.
It's a good question. Maybe your slide towards the Horus Heresy is a reflection of this.
It's the kind of history. It is space history.
Yeah, but
made up space history.
So it might be a gateway drug to more realistic battlefields.
I think to some extent I like putting my own stamp on things too much, and also I think I find the fantasy element helps insulate me from the grimmer connotations of playing battle games. Like, I like that is still, even when it's presented with grim, dark verisimilitude or seriousness, it is still a fantasy.
Right.
Not to say that I don't find, traditional war games off-putting necessarily, but I find them, I think, creatively limiting. And, I don't know. I guess it just doesn't appeal to me yet. Like, I'm fascinated by ancient warfare, and I find the idea of it interesting, but I like the idea of it in a video game where my investment is a bit lower. Like, I could just dive into a Total War or something and just play Rome for a bit to experience that. I think if I was going to really spend the time, like, creating these little people and painting them, I'd want them to be mine more substantially than they can be. Yeah. But maybe that will change.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think historical wargame settings, particularly in, like, World War I, World War II, are really good, especially in like town battles and things. That's a really good fit for wargaming on like a 4x4 board or a 6x4 board, where you can create a combat space that really match the type of combat space that happened. And there are just really fascinating asymmetrical tactical contrasts between the forces that fought in, for for the Second World War.
Yeah,
that
no, you're right.
Would be like really engaging to play. But it's a really good point, Chris, that like if you're going to paint a Sherman from a particular part of the war, it's going to have to look like that, and it's going to have the correct insignia on it, and it's going to have to look like one. You know what I mean? I
mean, that said, that might just be down to purely subjective taste, because I've got a stack of like detailed Star Wars miniature replicas that I'm yet to assemble and paint, which are exactly that. I'm going to paint them correctly. I'm not going to put my own stamp on them. I'm going to do a correct Y-wing. It's, I don't know. Like where I play X-Wing every month, there are always people playing Bolt Action or Saga, which is like a sort of Northern invasion era war game. I think maybe the thing I find intimidating is they're all grown-ups. Like there's always like people about my age, maybe slightly older and younger, playing X-Wing, and then people about my age playing Warhammer, and then like nice gentlemen in their 40s and 50s playing Bolt Action and Saga.
Yeah.
And maybe I just don't think I'm there yet. Maybe I'm hanging out with the cool kids.
I could see
children playing with the spaceships.
I could see myself getting into it, really, especially because a lot of that stuff's really cover oriented, and that's like not a system that really exists. The cover exists in a slightly awkward way in both 40k and AOS, whereas actual kind of hitting a wall, overlooking a street, and then rolling for how those guns will actually work. I can see the appeal of it.
Definitely, sure. Yeah, I can totally see the appeal. I just not yet.
Maybe yet. For the era of like more colourful army bearings, like for more colourful.
I think one side of it for me is that like I do love a good model, and I mean where I play a lot of stuff in Bristol, like the huge scene for historical wargaming and a huge number of models in stock. Because it tend to be from smaller manufacturers with fewer resources, I do find that the models are often like a lot worse than what GW does.
Yeah.
And so that's the other side of it, is like, no one's making sort of World War II models at the level of kind of detail and fidelity and stuff that GW make.
Yeah,
Magic Space people.
Yeah.
But an interesting point. Like, I don't mean to dismiss it at hand, because inevitably we'll be dialing in a year from now and I'll be talking about painting correct,
Look at my tiny beautiful red shirts.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Next question comes from Alex, who writes, "Hello, miniature men." I mean, that really applies to me, but not Tom. I used to be quite into the Warhammer-like War Machine, buying a whole army, attending events, etc., etc., etc. I enjoyed the social aspect of the game, and listening to your podcast, I've been taken with how you approach games to tell stories and make the games interesting. The aspect which turned me off playing War Machine and eventually made me stop playing altogether was how competitive the scene was. It wasn't about making friends or telling stories through play or even having a good time. The scene in Ireland is totally about crushing your enemy. The final straw for me was being invited to a chat room with a group of players. I was just about to introduce myself when they started complaining about how I'd played and how stupid I was to make the moves I did at a recent event. Overall, I just found the whole experience very unpleasant and really turned me off tabletop miniature games. But everything I found about the retooling of 40k is drawing me back in, and now I'm in London, I'm curious about starting it up again. Do you have any recommendations on how to have a nice time playing tabletop games without the one-upmanship and alpha nerdery that I found in my previous experience? Thanks for reading, Alex.
This is a consistent problem, like this culture gap between competitive play and just happy hobbyist play. And I think you just almost like trial and error. Well, first of all, get into our Discord community and chat to our lovely people who are really nice wargamers in our community. Like, it's a really nice way to get into a positive community. Otherwise, I can think maybe it's just visiting stores and attending clubs and seeing what the vibe's like until you find a group of people who share that mentality.
Yeah, I think trying a few clubs is the thing. Like, I'm still surprised by like how variable wargaming community attitudes can be. Because I've always found X-Wing to be pretty lovely across the board. Not universally, but overwhelmingly, like I've said before. I found AOS to be on the whole lovely. But wherever my AOS experiences overlap with 40k, I found that to be quite negative, which is not to say anything about the 40k community, because it's a big, big community. Just that's been the pattern for me. Like, for whatever reason. And there are things about the sort of wargamer aptitude, like alpha nerdery is a good way to put it. But also things like the sense of humor and things, the kind of language that gets used that I found extremely off-putting sometimes.
Yeah.
And don't get around that, because I love this hobby. And it even hit me yesterday at Warhammer Fest, just overhearing conversations in queues and things and feeling both like profoundly excited and inspired about the hobby and loving that side of it, but also feeling put off by some of the attitudes expressed, that you hear expressed and so on. And that's just a thing. I feel the same way with video games. Like, I worked in video games for long enough. It was exposed enough to those comment threads to not feel a profound connection to everybody who shares my hobby.
Yeah.
And I think inevitably you won't. But like with video games, I think the key is finding people who play the game like you do and want to play the game like you do. And maybe in London that's a bit easier to achieve. Like, I imagine there's going to be clubs that suit you and clubs that don't.
Yeah.
And actually one thing I've found recently is more and more people like our age are getting back into this. Like Warhammer is in a boom period, as I think Tom Bolton put it yesterday when we were talking to him.
Yeah.
And so it feels like there are multiple levels of engagement with it, but there are a bunch of people at our position of like kind of relatively relaxed hobbyist who plays a bit.
Yeah,
You know, who
just like a small group of friends who pull other friends into it. I think that's probably a very large part of the audience, rather than the super hardcore competitive gamers side of it. I think a lot of it is people in their garages inviting friends over and having a few beers and doing it. And if you can find some friends like that, that's the best.
Yeah,
because you bounce your ideas off each other. It's really creative. It's good.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how things shake out, because I imagine New 40K is going to be pretty big because it's hitting at the right time. I think it's the right game.
Yeah.
And so I think that'll expand the hobby quite a lot.
Yeah,
and there will always be, as with any gatekeeper-y nerd community, there will always be people who've been there the longest and who are the loudest and the most gatekeeper-y about things. That is not a Games Workshop problem. That is a geek culture problem.
Right.
But be honest, at some point, I think when you get enough of a weight of enthusiastic new people, those people do ultimately get drowned out. So hopefully it'll be quite a positive year. But yeah, the safest way in the short term is to find friends who are into it as well.
Yeah.
So our final question is going to be a super quick one, because it's from John, who very, I guess, what's the word? Presciently writes, in your last pod, you had a question about a cheap way to play with just a few heroes in AOS or 40k, which we now obviously have through Skirmish. The thing I think you missed was to buy one of the Silver Tower hero packs. One has 4 heroes from different factions, the other 5 and can be got for sub £30. Free rules online, and the fact that they're more varied than Gore Chosen makes this a recommendation from me. Thanks for the great pod, John. Which is actually quite a cool idea if people want to pick up sort of a booster pack of miscellaneous heroes.
Yeah, those models are great as well. Really lovely models. And also you get a flavour from, we're talking about design language and stuff earlier, but because it cherry picks from so many wildly different factions, you get lots of different design flavours and lots of different ways of painting them. So painting an elf or painting a Dwarden, it's going to be very different.
Yeah. I suppose the downside of that actually in the light of the Skirmish rules. So it's actually a really good idea when it comes to like, if you wanted to like split a box of heroes with your mates just to play one-off games. Yeah. Great. The downside is it's actually pretty incompatible with Skirmish. Now that I think about it.
True.
Because A, heroes are vastly more expensive than anything else in the game. Yeah. So you're not going to have more than one of them. B, the only rule is that you're limited to constructing out of one Grand Alliance. And given that those boxes tend to come with like every Grand Alliance represented, means that you're functionally getting one model that you can
use in Skirmish.
Yeah. So, but yeah, see, I think it's a good point of view, because actually people kind of forgot that they did that. Like these kind of functionally Silver Tower expansions, but all they are 4 hero models packed in for half the price that would normally be.
Yeah. And in open play, it's totally fine to take those war scrolls and just kind of make them fight on a tabletop using the core rules. That'll totally work.
Roll dice until somebody wins.
Yeah.
Usually Tom.
We'll see.
Universally Tom.
Well, maybe 40k will be your comeback.
Yeah, I thought about that when I completely diced you in that first game. It was totally unfair.
Maybe this is it.
It was like, maybe this is the one I'm good at.
Maybe in the 41st millennium, it's my time.
Yeah, exactly. In the grim darkness of the far future, there's only me rolling completely bullshit dice.
Right.
And then you winning the one that was in any semblance fair.
It works well as Siege. Siege has control of luck and change.
Does he though?
Well, I don't know. He would claim that.
Historically. That is all the questions we have and all of the long podcast we've got time for.
So much good stuff.
Lots of good stuff. It was an exciting month. Next month's going to be exciting as well, because we're going to be on the other side of all these releases.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll have a Primaris box.
Maybe you will. You probably will. You don't think you will, but you will. If you'd like to send us a question for a future episode, you can do so by emailing us miniatures@crateandcrowbar.com is the address for questions. You can follow both Crate and Crowbar on Twitter @CrateandCrowbar, and now you can follow Minis Monthly @Minis Monthly, which is an account that both Tom and I share to post work in progress pictures of our miniatures, as you might expect.
Woo.
So Minis Monthly is now on iTunes. We're going to work on Google Play submission, but it's really helpful to us if you could leave a review or rate the show on iTunes. And equally, it's on YouTube as well, on the Crate and Crowbar YouTube channel at YouTube.com/Crate and Crowbar, and any kind of all of the liking and subscribe and stuff people say at the end of episodes of stuff. It all applies and it does all help. And particularly on iTunes, it does help make the podcast more visible. And also just sharing it with people. If you like it, sharing it with other people, because we're trying to get the word out a little bit, and it's a new community for us. So it's kind of be nice to try and crack it. this podcast particularly is supported by the Crate and Crowbar Patreon, which has allowed us to spin out from our PC gaming focused main podcast into things like this podcast and also the Bloodborne playthrough that we're doing and the special guests that we're bringing on and the one-off podcasts we're doing. And we recently did one on Prey. Lots of stuff. We've had a very busy week, actually. If you'd like to find out more about that and how you can support the podcast, that's at patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. Otherwise, the only thing that remains is our own details. Tom, you're on Twitter.
I'm on Twitter at PCGLudo, which is LUDO.
And I'm on Twitter at CThurston, which is CTHURSTEN. And I have a miniatures Instagram, which is Exit Warp, which is like exiting and also warping. Like where you go if you do bad.
If you've done the wrong thing in Warhammer 40,000.
Yeah, exactly. Or like the Planet of the Sorceress, sometimes you exit warp. Well, I'm going to go away forever now.
Until next month.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Thanks for listening.